that explains what I did and why it is what it is.
Did you send it out to, are you gonna call me
I
in
had given
order
it to
at
Barbara,
9:02?
and I thought she would, when she gave it in, would give it to everybody, but I guess not.
No, she rolls she rolls it into the big budget. She rolls it into the
Well, I know she rolled it into that, and I don't have a copy of that.
Oh, okay.
So, but what I did is I went through every contingency, everything that was told that we have to do by the state, every possibility that I put in there, because we hadn't budgeted for it in a couple of other years. And
No,
wound
not
up-
yet. Joyce is making
Oh,
comments.
okay. Good morning.
So the budget is actually created with top places where I figure you can cut it if you want to.
Mhm.
But like, we don't know if there's going to be a primary in August, because we have state offices that will be on the ballot,
Mhm.
and if it will be a single primary or a double primary. So this time I budgeted for it.
Okay.
Which one is it found? No, I don't want to be on the guest.
Oh, I don't
I
know.
don't want to be on public.
Oh, I don't know what the.
And it's the same with after every election, there's always the possibility of having a recount for a particular office, or there's a possibility of us being audited.
Mhm.
I've been here 7 years, we've never been audited, but they put all the names in a hat, literally, and pulled them out.
Oh, really? It's
Yes.
completely random.
So it could happen at any time.
Wow.
And an audit requires a complete hand count, which means we have to hire a lot of people to come in and count on the ballot. They only choose a couple of races, but still, everybody has to sit there and literally hand count every single ballot.
Wow.
Yes, so it's a long process with a lot of people, so.
And do you have volunteers that, you have sort of waiting in the wings, or you have like a list of people?
We
who
have a
would
list of
come?
people, but all of our people get paid for doing this, it's not a volunteer job.
Oh, right, sorry.
I mean, I wouldn't ask somebody to sit there for 10 hours and count ballots and not pay.
Oh, is that how long it takes?
Well, it depends, it depends on how many people,
Thank
if
you.
we have like 1,980 some odd voters right now, or 90 some odd voters. And by the presidential, I'm sure we're gonna have over 2,000,
Mhm.
because we did last time. I mean, we had 50 people that came in and registered and voted on election day,
Mhm.
which is why we need extra people in our office for those people, because that's an essential function, the EDRs.
I think that's your original.
Oh. This is my breakdown of how I figured out our budget. And I can indicate places where if you want to cut it, we probably can do it and get away with it.
So do you wanna just take us through this?
Okay. Our regular work hours, the registrars work 3 hours a week. That times 52 times 2 comes to 312 hours. We're not sure, there's always, the state will be probably providing a lot of extra training this year. We're going to be doing a lot of extra cybersecurity work for the election and training, so I would put in an extra 20 hours for the two of us for the training. That's on top of And that is something we're placing, if you needed to cut, we probably could cut that back. We don't know, as I said, if we're going to have a primary in August for the state offices that will be on the presidential ballot. Or whether it will be a single primary or a double primary. In a double primary, we can get away with, we can have one moderator and one tabulated tender. But we have to have a Democratic ballot clerk and checker and a Republican ballot clerk and checker. So we have to add at least 2 extra people to that. If it looks like it's gonna be a big primary, then we have to add people on both sides to count absentee ballots, because there's not enough time and ability for the single deputy registrar to be able to do that. But if we don't have a lot of absentee ballots, then we just let them do that. But if there's more than 20 or 30, they just don't have the time and ability to do that. So we have to hire extra people to count absentee ballots.
What's
We'd
the,
have to be in our office the day before from 9 to 5 by state law.
I'll take your budget.
Oh,
Thank you.
We have people that can register to vote up until noon on that day and will be eligible to vote in the primary. So we have to be there to register. Also, we have to check off the absentee ballots on the
There it is.
official voter list with the town clerk to make sure that they're all correct. We print out all the voter lists, and we have to set up the polling place. Plus, we are required to give a minimum of 2 hours of training to each poll worker. We sometimes do it as a group and sometimes individually. And then we're also planning, and that's in the training part, this year to do a mock election training. So prior to the presidential election, just to make sure that everybody is really up on what needs to be done, so that there aren't any problems, because we have occasionally had problems with people forgetting what their job is or not remembering how to do something, or so we want to make sure everybody's really, because we expect turnout to be close to 80%. So it's going to be, then after the primary, I put in, we always have a couple hours there next day when we have to finish all the state filings and paperwork that needs to be done. And then a possible audit or recount. If there's the last state election we had a recount for Johanna Hayes, or not Johanna, for Maria Horn, that we hadn't planned on. We almost had one for your position at the state town elections.
Yeah.
So we never, obviously, we don't know whether we'll have one or we won't have one. And it may not take 10 hours to do it. An audit would, a recount probably would take only a couple hours.
okay.
So,
Karen, this year, this fiscal year that we're in, you've spent year to date $6,500, right, on your registered, so $14,000.
I can't hear you, you need to,
You've spent $14,000 to date.
yes.
You have 4 or 5 months left in the fiscal year.
I
You
have a
have,
primary coming up, presidential preference primary.
when does that happen?
April 28th, and
And
we
you-
don't know yet whether it's a single primary or a double primary.
Right, likely it's gonna be a single one, but
Well, then she hasn't decided yet, because I already
Okay.
talked to the
so you
secretary.
anticipate spending another $15,000 in
Oh,
that?
and we have right after that, the following week, we have a referendum.
Okay, whatever you have, you expect to spend
I
the full
expect to spend it,
15,000.
yes.
So would it be safe to say, because it looks like on the full election years or the national election years, you're spending roughly $25,000?
At least, yeah.
Okay, on the not off years, if you will, we'll call our election
It's
the
less.
off year.
The budget will drop next year, most
Okay.
likely.
So really,
Um,
really, at this point, you're looking for an increase for the 2021 of, if you're saying, you know, the $8,000 beyond what typically you spend
Mhm.
on the election year cycle,
Right.
and that just seems a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, given, I know you have all the hours printed out here, but it just seems, are there just new regulations, are there, or is it just?
When we had the state election year, we overspent our budget. We had to go back and ask for a couple of $1,000s more.
Okay,
So, and then what I did is I went through and looked at everything, every possibility that we might have. Plus we
anything else?
added all the hours and for the, special training that we're doing.
Mm-hmm,
And that the fact that we're gonna probably have more training this year from the state that we have to do.
mm-hmm, okay,
When we go to our conference, and that's one of the things that popped it up a little bit, is because if all four of us go, which is unlikely, because it rarely ever happens, then we would need 4 bedrooms in a hotel for 3 nights.
and the only thing that I've always wondered why, I mean, it
And
looks,
at $100 a night.
it looks like you're spending, you have $1,000 roughly for food,
Yes.
and that to me seems just like a lot. I
Well,
remember,
we feed everybody, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They're there 15 hours. And I budgeted $10 per person for each meal, which isn't a lot.
well, I understand that, it just seems, I don't know. Do all polling places feed people?
It's up to the, and that was Jan's decision, not mine. She felt that we should be feeding people, so.
And it just seems, what normally happens if you don't feed them? What goes on?
Well, we always fed breakfast.
Okay, yeah, because you're up at early morning, but
Well, we're here at 5 o'clock, yeah. We start at 5 o'clock.
my question is, what happens if you don't spend $1,000 feeding people?
Well, what we normally did was the people would bring their own lunch, and then everybody would chip in at night and buy pizza.
Okay,
They used to do a potluck as well in the kitchen for years.
I remember
Everybody would
that,
bring
because
stuff
I
in
remember
for
doing
breakfast.
that, okay.
That's in addition to.
That's one thing that stands out to me, is $1,000 for food.
I mean,
for-
because we don't pay, I mean, they make, what, $13 an hour, something like that, to sit there for 15 hours?
Yeah, well, they shift in and out.
Sometimes we break up the shifts, but some people can't have their shifts broken up. And
Um,
so it was, Jan felt that we should be feeding them all of their meals, and that was what we've been doing. I just took it out of, we had been taking it out of supplies, and I just broke it down into what we were actually spending.
I appreciate that,
Mhm.
I appreciate that.
Um, I mean, it's a very, very long day for most people.
Yeah, massages might be more appropriate.
Hmm?
Yeah.
Massages
Chair
might be
massages.
Massages, yes, and maybe a couple of drinks.
Well, that we,
But we don't allow that, so.
And your postage, what do you use your postage for?
Mostly it's for the canvas, and also every time somebody is registered, we have to send them a letter confirming that, telling them that they're registered and giving them some information. But it also, for us, lets us know, because it's a forwardable, yeah, we have to put do not forward, so that if if it comes back, then we know we have a problem, and we have to trace the person down and find out why if they hadn't given us the correct address, or for whatever reason, so. But we're required, and that's one of the things that happens when you see, prior to the election, check daily for, voter registrations.
Mhm.
The week to 2 weeks before the cutoff date, which is the week before the election, for most everybody, but not everybody, we have to come into the office every day and check to see if anybody's registered and register them that day and send out their letters. Normally, we can wait the week until we come to work, but because it's so close to the election, we want to make sure everybody is registered in time and that they've gotten their letters, that we have to come in that period and do that. We're required to.
That's in statute?
Pardon?
That's in statute?
Statute says it has to be sent out the day that they're registered. So if we get it in the mail the day that day, we have to send it right out. If they come in to the town clerk's office and fill it out, and we come in and it's there, we have to send it right out. So we have to be as close to us the day they registered as we can possibly be. And we can't wait a week because we might get to the point where it's, we hit the cutoff date. And most of the extra hours that are in here for elections and primaries are statute. The one day for the, on the 10/27 when we have to be here for the mandatory registration session, that's 9 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. It's 11 hours, and we have no, that's in the statute, we have to be there. You know, and if one of us can't be there, then our deputy has to be there.
And how many registrations have you typically had in that day?
Anywhere from 1 to 10. And it will get, if it's anything like it was the last presidential election, they're gonna come fast and furious in that last couple of weeks before the election. For the primary, there's a cutoff date for when you can change parties, just as there was for this one. So there's always a possibility that we would have people coming in to change for the primary too. And then a lot of people will change, and then a week later they'll change back. So
The telephones,
I think she took that out,
yeah, you took that out? Okay,
yeah, because I just.
so that should drop.
No, it's still.
That was in my last budget, and I
I
just
see that.
mostly just copied those numbers up because they haven't really changed.
All right, well, we
That
don't,
was not in-
telephones are run, you use our telephone, so we pay that right through,
Town hall.
Yeah, well, we used to pay it separate, and now we don't.
right, we changed that last year,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah, so
So-
that one could go
that's
up.
fine, we're gonna go.
And on the last page is minimum requirements for elections, for employees, et cetera.
Thank you.
Well, and in conferences, I know you've noted it, but again, if you look over time, you haven't spent $3,500 typically on conferences.
Because generally, not everybody goes. But if everybody goes, we had one year when everybody went because the conference was in Mystic.
Where is it this year?
I don't know because they're moving it from wherever it was last year because everybody complained so badly about the hotel, it was awful, so.
But you spent on
But
average,
we did average, it costs $100 a night per person. And we used to double up, but nobody wants to share a room anymore, and I'm 75 years old and I don't really wanna share a room with somebody.
right, but what I'm seeing is a consistent $1,500 spent each year.
And I said, this is set up for the maximum amount of money that I would have to spend, and there's places where if you wanna cut it, you can cut it. As I said, I don't know if 4 people are gonna go to the conference. Very likely they won't, but,
But they may.
I mean, I can't, and we have 2 conferences a year, this is the one in the fall, we don't stay overnight, cause it's usually in Southbury or Danbury. But the other one is on the other side of the state, and it's, by the time we would,
Yep, go back, I got
going
you.
back and forth and back and forth, we
Man,
would,
it doesn't make sense.
yeah. You know, especially because you have to be there by 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and you
Yep.
have to leave here like at 6, and not get back until 6 or 8 that night.
I get it.
Plus, there's a lot of good networking we can do in the evening, when they have a party every night, and we spend a lot of time talking to people
Yep.
and getting ideas of things that we can do, and the conferences are very helpful.
Good.
You know, I find that I learn a lot at them, and and I get a chance to talk to other registrars from different places who, and see how they solve problems.
Right.
And we all have them.
Mhm. I'm good.
Me too.
So I'm just looking at, on the budget worksheet that I have, there's a supply line for $6,225.
Most of the supplies I wrote down, and then I added, where are we on supplies?
On that like third to last page.
And we added, as I said, we added, a 6-hour training for everybody.
Mhm.
That won't be in the budget ever again, this is just gonna be a one-time, one-shot deal, just because of the, we just wanna be everybody prepared for any kind of, particularly our moderators, when we have people that show up and cause trouble, and how do we handle those? So, which one are we looking at?
Well, it looks like, maybe it's just on Barbara's worksheet, it looks like that's separated out in addition to adding up all those. It looks like the 6225 is one line item, and then they took all of your line items that look like they make up that 60.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that just looks like it might be an error.
it is an error.
Okay. I'm good.
Okay, and I tried to break down and explain what each expense was and why we had it.
Yep. Appreciate it, very much so.
When we have to send those, memory cards to, either back to, LHS, or we send them to, Yukon, we always insure them, because each one costs $600. So, that's part of our postage, that's one of the things we have to do, is mail those out and insure them.
And you ship them versus, there's no electronic process for that to be
No, they have to go
transmitted?
physically there. Yukon tests one before the election and tests one after the election.
Mhm.
And then we send the rest of them, we have 4 altogether, and we send, once we can take it out of the tabulator, it has to stay in there for 14 days after the election. Then we send them back to LHS, they keep them all.
Mhm.
And then when it comes time to program them, and these few elections that we have coming up are going to have, a lot of programming to be done,
Mhm.
especially if we have a double primary, because we only use one tabulator,
Mhm.
and that memory card has to know the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, as well as the absentee ballots for Republicans and absentee ballots for Democrats. And at least on the Democratic side, it's going to be a long ballot.
Mhm.
At least right now it is. It's shortening up, but we don't know how many people will be left by then. So it's costs quite a bit to have those programmed.
Okay.
The ones for the referendum, they're already programmed for yes, no.
Mhm.
And we can have up to 4 questions, but they have to be a yes, no question. You can't put,
Right.
would you like to have this, kind of thing.
Ed, do you have any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome. If you have any other questions or whatever, don't hesitate to ask. I'll try to remember how to do this room. But if you need to cut it, there are places I've indicated where it probably is cuttable, but
Okay.
I just decided that this year, because I hadn't ever done it before, we just sort of went on whatever we spent last year kind of thing, and I went through it. Well, let's see where we're spending money and what is the most maximum amount of money that we would have to spend in a year.
Gotcha.
And then a lot of those things are probably not going to happen, but I don't know. And whether you want us to not spend it and then have to come back later if it does happen and ask for more money, this is your option, not mine.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks.
but I wanted you to know how I figured it out.
Appreciate it.
Much appreciated.
Can't hear anything.
Come on down. Bless you, bless you. Good morning.
Good to see you.
See you too.
Tom.
Hi, Kendra. Jean, nice to meet you,
Good
Kendra.
seeing you. Thank you for having us.
Certainly.
No,
No?
So I had
No, it's
provided to Barbara the 18 return,
Okay.
and I went ahead and rushed through the 19, so that's current. Yes.
Brown knows everybody.
No, just to give you
That's great.
updated.
so same request
Yes.
Same request.
and same question. How are we doing?
Doing great.
We're actually doing really great.
Excellent.
Finally are out of
Let me-
crisis mode.
Let me just stop for these two, you know, I've been here for the last number of years, the Children's Center for, what's it, Kent Community Nursery School, proper name, has been sort of tenuous in terms of how many kids and timing and then competition from other groups
And it's a numbers game,
Yeah.
just not a lot, as many kids
Right.
in the area.
Right.
Exactly.
But now there are more.
There's more. We sort of, and you can do a little talking, but we've restructured, we've changed our hours.
Yeah,
Okay.
we were overextended, I think. We were trying to work till 5:30 and there really wasn't that need here. So now, we're working with the school district to try to get where the kids need full-time care. They come to us in the morning and then go over to KCS preschool for the afternoon.
Good.
Because they didn't have that they just started, 2 years ago?
2 years
So
ago.
that's working for a lot of the private school parents that need care till 3:30. And then otherwise, I mean, a lot of people from New York State, because New York has, no 3-year-old program, but they have a 4-year-old preschool. So they come over for the year, which is helpful when they have siblings. We have teachers that we just hired that are out of New Milford, so we have New Milford coming up, there's always a competition with Warren and stuff, because we don't take babies, but, we have 13 kids, one for a morning school program, but, very consistent, 3 days, 5 days, so it's good.
Right. And we cut back our payroll significantly.
Because of the changes of
Because of
time.
the changes in the hours. So we ran a surplus in 18 of 1,500. This year's surplus is 8,400. And that's even with a reduction in some,
Fees.
the Kent Presents grant that we
Oh, okay.
received every year, which is
Mhm.
no longer.
Right.
We did up our fundraising and was able to get in almost $5,000 from our letter
Mhm.
this year.
That's great.
So, yes, so again, the surplus went up about $7,000. So we're pleased.
Yeah, 7 returning next year, a definite, and then we gotta reach out for more. And then we'd like to, hire another head teacher. Cause we went from like seasoned teachers to kind of people that we could pay less, and then we'd like to get, a head teacher in there that would probably be, $18 to $20 an hour.
Right.
So, that's where the grants and stuff help, and for scholarships, 7 out of the 13 are on scholarship.
And that
And-
totaled about $67.50 last year in scholarships.
67.50.
Yep.
So 50% of your children are on scholarship.
Yeah, and then there's 2 of them that are on 40% or more, so, and they also use Care for Kids, but that doesn't give as much as we can.
And you don't feed them, do you, in the morning?
No,
They bring one, oh no, we give them a snack, yeah.
we get some snacks.
Oh,
Some-
snacks.
Some bring,
But
some
I'm
bring
not talking about.
no lunches or anything like that, no.
And the question I ask every year is, what's the break point where you don't need us anymore?
We're always gonna need you. Right now, we burn about 2,000 a month from operating.
Okay,
So
so
if
where?
we have a surplus of 8,400 without the town's money, we'd have a deficit of 7,000, we wouldn't be able to survive.
Right, but a surplus at some point, if we're projecting out, becomes an actual surplus of a pretty good savings account. So what I'm asking is, on a scale of a number of years, if you have a surplus, when does the town diminish in terms of a grant? if need be. I'm not suggesting that
Well,
we
if
do it,
we-
I'm just suggesting,
I think
There-
when it was KCS, well, before we combined schools, I feel like when we had a CD and then we had what, I feel like we had like 30 in the account. And we were not, that school didn't use grants. Children's Center did, and then
Children's Center did.
we combined,
Mhm.
we obviously needed them because there was no kids, but I think the problem is kids, you know, we're trying to be tuition, you know, and operating costs equal, but no one's having any more kids unless more Kent faculty brings in more kids.
Well, I know that more kids have I know for a fact more kids have landed here.
Yes, so we, I mean, there's been so
There-
we're hoping to get some of that.
Right,
I mean,
and,
it's gonna be
It's-
tuition driven. I mean, if we run surpluses of 8,400 a year, eventually we are gonna have a surplus in the back.
right, but even if you have a surplus, you're always gonna run into kids that need more money.
We
or-
always need that nest egg
So,
because
I guess
the unknown. That's
The idea
problem.
obviously is to help you, but eventually launch you if possible. And if not 15,000, but 7,000, half of it, so, it would, for me, be nice to know
I mean, we
what
would-
that number, magic number is.
Well, if we can
If
do it
it's-
within a couple of years, is that, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, we're striving to be as profitable as we can be.
No doubt. No
I mean, and we really, I mean, when I looked at the numbers and finally put everything together, I mean, we reduced salaries by almost $29,000.
So, I know this is getting in the weeds a little bit, but of the new families that move here with children, do you reach out to them
Yes.
immediately?
Yep, we actually have, an open house, in April scheduled.
30th?
And we have a Facebook page and it's always on, so when you, whatever you pay for, so when you do nursery schools in Kent, it's like one of the top ones.
Mhm.
And then our teachers run the Facebook page, we have our educator running the Facebook page too, so that's always on. And, yeah, I mean, we had some woman, she literally came from Millbrook and we got her within hours. And we have both her kids,
She has 3 kids, right?
so,
And do you do any, like, reach out to, like, Sharon Hospital? I know we're not having babies much
no.
down at the Milford
No.
Hospital.
Yeah, I mean,
Or the pediatricians, or,
Yeah, there's not really that many in town either, because the FAA doesn't even, there's like maybe.
right, no, I mean, like, the pediatrician in Sharon, just to, I don't know, you know, have a,
Just maybe send a letter to them and
Yeah, have
let
a-
them know that we're here. I mean, I
Yeah, no,
suppose we
yeah,
do.
not a big, you know.
Yeah, it's just I found it hard to compete with KCS preschool now that they've opened. They used to just be morning and now they're afternoon, and it's what, $1,000 a year to
Mhm.
send them, where comparable hours, it's probably 2,700 to come to ours. So it's just, I mean, where we run longer, where we're, you know, say the preschool is 8:30 to 1, but when people see numbers, it's like, oh yeah, who cares, it's only 2.5 hours, but my kid's out of the house, whatever, but
Mhm.
that's very hard, and the program over there keeps changing, because it doesn't seem to be it's under a different umbrella, I guess, the special ed, so she is now taking kids all day, which kind of messes us up,
That's
so
up to you.
we're trying to work with that, but you know, it's a competition thing, and we're not really in competition with her, but she wants more numbers. And again, we can't compete with the
Price point.
price point and the fact that if you throw a kid under, you know, having speech, they go for free.
Right.
So it's just, we're reaching out to Sharon would be good. You know, we're able to do that now that a lot of the preschool kids come here
Mhm.
from Sharon, so that at least they hear our name and stuff, but.
And I know there was a daycare provider in Gaylordsville that is no more, and I don't know if maybe you could get some of that, traffic.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I just know Renee Greenberger. That's all.
Oh, I thought she
Oh,
she
she's still there.
retired.
She's still there. She just mostly babies for her. So
Oh,
we get all of her
oh, the,
3-year-olds
Older.
that need more play. So yeah,
Mhm.
she sends them our way. So
Oh,
she's still
great.
there with the babies.
she's great.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, this is all part of a bigger economic picture.
Yep.
And what we're throwing out is ideas to reach out to others who are struggling with the same, but on a different level. You know, some is business, some is, you know, just patrons. So the Chamber of Commerce might be somebody to partner with and say, hey, look, you know, we wanna show you that we have something solid, so that you can show whomever that we have something solid, and I think we're all pulling in that same direction.
Yeah, our big loss also is, you know, we don't take babies. So we lose them to Kent School, and then once they're there, they kind
Oh,
of
right,
stay,
they
and
stay.
then Warren also has babies, and it's the same sort of thing, like once your kid's
I
comfortable.
mean, we
fine.
looked into that, but that.
We don't have the
would take-
square
We
footage.
don't have the square footage,
Right,
you need separate rooms and you.
Mhm.
But no, well, I mean, I think, and we have our education committee, she's, I think, the president of Moms Club in New Milford, so she is constantly throwing things out there, which covers Sherman,
Good.
Washington,
Mhm.
and something else.
Do you think there's any market to like a, part-timer or summer, you know, people who come for just the summer, or people who come just, you know, for
I
more?
do think there is a market for that, it's getting the teachers, because, most of them are moms and their kids are home at 8.
Mhm.
Like, we had it one year and it was thriving, but it was TJ and Ava both did not have kids, so they were into it.
Mhm.
And then they have changed jobs since, so
So
getting
people
Jamie,
staff it
yeah,
now,
the
it's-
staffing now has kids, so it's just, it's getting the staff. If we could find it, that'd be great, because Marcy Saunders used it, like a lot of people used it, and they could come for the day, they could come for the week, they could come for the 3 weeks, and it was whatever, and you could pay by the day, and it was great, but it's getting the teachers.
It works.
Yeah.
So,
No more questions from
You've been doing this a long time, haven't you?
yes,
he started
Yes,
in
thank you for
preschool.
knowing
I
that.
got on the board of
He
Kent Children's
graduated.
Center.
Right, he graduated
It was a
from
right
center
idea to
school.
bring fathers on the board
Yeah.
at Kent Children's Center. My daughter's will be 20, she'll be 29, and that was about 26 years ago,
Yeah,
and I'm still here.
cause I'm looking at the budget 2001, 2002,
And there you are, huh?
and you were on the back page.
Yep, that's, I am.
And at that time,
I'm
you
that
were
old.
asking
Remember
for,
those
I'm
and
that
you were
old.
asking for 9,000 then,
Yes,
and it'd been in existence for about 23 years before that.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I look at my daughter Ruby, she's in 5th grade, there was a waiting list to get into Kent Center, Kent Community Nursery School.
Mhm.
And now Vera is in 3rd grade, and there's a total of 16 kids in her grade. So it dropped within that 2 years.
Right.
And then
Wow.
Hugh is in kindergarten, and it got a little bit bigger, but his total class, I think, is maybe 22 or something. So, I mean, Ruby's grade was the biggest, and it's still not that big. Kids have moved here and there.
It's been pretty traditional, even when our kids were little.
Mhm.
Really? I thought there were times that it was just,
There was one point that it was sort of this big bulge, but then it's always sort of gone.
but you had like, when Tanta Sue was there, she was able to, oh, I can't take this. She only wanted her certain amount. She was able to turn people away. Then there was Fridays, they were hiring another teacher, and then it went from like, oh my gosh, we have 6 kids.
Right.
It was, so, I don't know if it'll let her boom again here, but we're doing the best we can now.
It will.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay,
Thanks for coming in.
Yep.
and thank you for your support and consideration.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for
Happy
coming in.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Do you want this back, or can
Nope,
we
that's
hang
your
on to
copy
it? Okay,
for
great.
your file.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I think just for a point of reference, for all the grants we used to get,
Mhm.
an actual tax return with a Schedule A.
Mhm. That's just Sarah
Right.
Marshall
Yes,
at the library. just so you know.
Library,
I think it was just a timing issue because this meeting was so early on a Friday morning that Barbara didn't get to get that information to you guys. She did receive.
oh, it doesn't matter. I mean, they're asking the same amount of money. It's
exactly.
not like it, I mean, really, I think it's any of them that are significantly changed.
Mhm.
Mm,
We have some dead time, so we can go through some of the ones that the selectman's office oversees if you wanna just
Let's
kinda.
do it.
Okay.
Sure. What do you got?
So I don't have any supporting paperwork, but we can just kind of use the budget form, so we can start on page 1 with the selectman's office.
Yep.
And we're just gonna do the operating portion, obviously. And I didn't ask for any additional. So, any questions on that?
So basically 56 to 67, right?
201 to 452.
452.
Correct. I don't know why she didn't put anything for conferences.
So notices don't seem to, it's just some years they just go crazy.
Yeah, it depends on how many meetings we have and
All those special meetings.
all those special meetings.
And really, it's like the hearings and.
Right.
Where does telephone go?
Excuse me?
Where does telephone go? Is it just?
Under town hall, not under
Under
select.
town hall, okay,
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
good, good.
I did put 100 in, I kept the 100 in conferences that didn't show up on here, so that's just a typo on
On that side,
an data entry error,
entry
yeah.
date.
Yep.
Right, looks good.
Okay, so then we can go to page, what else do I do?
Town hall,
Yeah, we can do town hall,
yep,
Okay.
four,
page 4.
right?
There is an increase, as you can see, in computer lines. That number's not solid yet. We're still waiting for the iCloud information. There's a little bump in there. But we received some information from the assessor's office. I'm waiting for the tax collector to sure that number up.
So maybe I'm just, I was thinking it was gonna be a big, big number, but it really isn't a big number increase, right?
Probably not as big as I too was expecting, a
Yeah,
much
I was-
larger number than we got
Well, I
from the
just thought
assessor's
like trying to
office.
get everybody here in town hall, but it's just data that's stored, so it's,
Well, at that point, I mean, I haven't talked to our IT for the balance of the people. I was
Yeah.
waiting for those 2 offices first to be extracted, if that's the route we're going, and then incorporate the town hall in that. So that number might fluctuate a little bit.
well, and you're also trending in the direction that computer
Yeah.
is trending. It's not
Yep.
like you're,
Well, we've done a lot of work downstairs, and this year we are over budgeted. I mean, we went over the budget. Windows 7 came up, surprised me, no longer,
right,
it needed
no
to be
longer
upgraded.
supported.
So there was a cost there that kind of hit me hard there.
And is this computer services also taking into consideration all protection and so, you know, that
Yeah,
kind of stuff?
everything related to IT.
And who runs that? You?
What do you
Who
mean?
oversees making sure that that the computers are secure and that we're doing actual really good protocol? I mean,
Right now, it's sort of left up to Bob from
The IT
Media Protect,
person does
but I'm
so,
gonna be digging into it with him. I think we need to do, some sort of assessment and
okay,
see where we need to
I just
harden.
know that, as an example, in my office, there are people who are not so savvy as to clicking on things, and others who
Oh, there's
are.
clearly, actually, we just did a buffer install that will protect us with that sort of thing. So
There's a-
IT
So there's protocol in
Well,
place.
it was an internet filtering.
Right.
Protocol
Right.
that he added.
Okay.
But, Demis will they'll come in and do a cybersecurity, like a threat assessment.
Mhm.
And then we'll follow up with some activities like, sending out an email and seeing
Saying,
what percentage of people click on it and then having a follow-up
okay, good.
activity.
And that's, the only reason I ask is I wanna make sure that we budgeted for that,
Right.
that additional.
Right, so like you said, that line, I may come back to you and say, by the way, I
Okay.
increased it another 5,000 or whatever, but I'll have supporting information as to why I did that. There's another increase in the internet, and that's because the social service department has asked for internet at the senior center, which it does not currently have. That's an additional expense so that they can upgrade.
That's another $2,000 expense.
It's like $80 a month, and
Well,
then
We budgeted 3,500 for this year.
yeah, let's see.
That's
That's-
another $1,500 to, seems pretty,
Seems like a pretty big jump, I'd give you that.
I mean, I'll volunteer for $1,500 to,
To do what? What are you gonna do, be a hotspot?
yeah, I'll be a hotspot, stand over there.
I'm not sure.
Okay, no biggie, but if you could check into
Yeah, I'll
that.
look into that.
So one of the,
Cause
go ahead.
and that would cover all Templeton
Well,
Farms or just the senior
Just-
center?
just the
Just the
senior
senior
center. I mean, we're not opening
It's
it
gonna
up
be an
to.
open public Wi-Fi, I mean, it's,
It would probably have the purpose, and she'll come and talk to us when she come and does her budget. But
yeah,
she wants to be able to, offer some programmatic activities that,
or
where they would
web-based.
use, yeah.
Okay,
And that includes like having she's working with the library and to have them bring over, like, they're gonna set up a little mobile library,
okay,
and likely add some of the sort of features and programs that the library offers over there, to the senior center.
okay. So why,
People come in and try to do like PowerPoints and that
no,
sort
no,
of
no,
stuff.
no, I
like
get
that.
it,
Yeah.
I get it, I'm just trying to in my brain arrange, this is not a talk, it's a town hall internet expense that we're doing,
Right.
but it's not for the town hall,
Yeah,
Correct.
so.
which is
Would
kind of
that-
a little
It's in the wrong
weird.
spot.
We do
Would it-
internet and phone all through town hall. You made that decision last year.
I know,
Internet and phone.
but we don't pay, or maybe correct me,
We do.
Do we pay the telephone for the community house through this
Yeah.
fund?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Okay. So anything that is a town-related, town hall-y building, if you will,
Mhm.
a town building.
Mhm.
And that was the board's decision.
Yeah, unless I
Yeah.
misunderstood
No,
it
no.
and you didn't want the ancillary buildings in there.
Yeah, it seems silly to have $300 in everybody's line, so we just bundled it. It made a lot of sense, but what I'm just wrapping my brain around is that it also covers the community house. Do we have Wi-Fi at the community house?
We do not yet. We're talking about putting it there too, and maybe that's what I did. Maybe that's what I
Oh,
did, because
maybe
we're
that's
talking
what it
about putting
was.
internet in that building as well.
Well, so the question is, begs, should we, do we have it down at the transfer station?
They have it at the garage, so by virtue of that, you could probably get it at the transfer station.
So if they have it at the garage, don't we have it by virtue over at,
Depends on what the hub is like.
It doesn't reach the senior center from the garage.
Really?
That's what-
No.
Oh,
No
no way,
way.
no.
No
Yeah,
way.
You'd have to do a handshake like on top of the firehouse or something.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah, it would not.
anyway. Okay, well, so they have, so I guess what this points out to me is we should probably look at every building and make sure that it's covered.
Correct.
If indeed that's what our
And
decision
that's
is.
probably, we had talked about it before, so I think I probably.
So if
voted
you could
for
just
that.
confirm not
Yeah, I
only the
will
number, but
confirm that.
also that every unit, every place that we have is covered, and then we have to decide how, I mean, does everybody have free access at the community house? I mean, I see people sitting in cars on Main Street using free
It
Wi-Fi.
doesn't have, it doesn't
at
have it
night.
right now.
No, I know
Oh, but
that,
in the
what I'm
future.
simply saying is,
Well, we can have it activated only for
so-
events,
okay,
so that it doesn't become
well, that's my
and
concern,
everybody's
that's my
hotspot.
concern if we start doing it for the senior center
We
and
can do the same thing, we can,
you can limit it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's make sure we do that.
and we
Does
can
that make
also,
sense, Ed?
we
'Cause-
can also have and we should have set
Yeah,
it so
set
there's
it
a
passcodes.
password, so that it's not, just an open, it's not a Starbucks Wi-Fi.
Mhm.
So that somebody driving along and their phone hunts it and,
Yeah, no,
and sees it, they still have to enter a password which they wouldn't know just driving by.
Yeah, I mean, the liability is actually, I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, and we can also, like, there are Wi-Fi hubs, like we have at the firehouse, where you actually have a compartmentalized Wi-Fi network, so
Mhm.
there's a guest
Right.
one that's got all sorts of, it's basically got like teenager filtering on it.
Right,
So there's a whole bunch of,
Good.
URLs that are on a, what is that called, on a blacklist, that you can't access.
okay,
So all those, we can keep it closed down. I do
Alright.
wanna just mention, Joyce and I looked into, bringing fiber into the building, cause I think with, this changeover to moving data where we're gonna be accessing it over the internet, it's gonna be more important for us to
Sure.
have fiber in the building. Unfortunately, when we had the option to bring fiber into the building, that didn't happen. So now we have to bring it.
When
from
was that option?
2012, 2014.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll have to bring it from the library.
To string it from the library?
No, it would go.
It's under?
But, it would cost about $50,000. So so
That's a big internet line.
it's big.
I have one.
You have one, yes you do.
Yeah, that's where we would be getting it from. So, do you have a generator
No. Well, at work? No.
at the library?
No.
Okay, so that would also affect whether we would be coming, from the library or from Kent Center School. Because if the, power went out at the library, because they don't
Then
have a
it all goes
generator,
down.
we would lose our internet access,
Mm.
but because the school has a generator.
But it would be cheaper to buy a generator and run it
It
from
would
the
definitely
library.
be cheaper, yes, than it would be to go the extra, it's like half a mile.
It was $30,000 to get it from Kent Center to the library.
Oh, the prices went down.
That was
Since,
5-6
but
years
it's
ago.
still, it would still be another probably 8,000 to 10,000 to go from here to the Kent Center School
That
instead of
makes
just to
sense.
the library.
Well, before we even, as considering that, I think you need to really start to think what else, possibility-wise, we need to have that. You know, does it need to, is it already at the firehouse?
Oh, so the other piece is that if we were to, come on the backbone,
Mm-hmm.
the firehouse, because the fiber's already there, the connectivity, the service would be rolled into the pricing that CEN gave us. Because they would be going over the PSDN and not over the Connecticut Education Network.
Right,
So that is a huge
savings.
plus and a huge savings.
Mm-hmm.
That we could, share with the firehouse, and it would benefit everybody. And it would probably help build that backbone that we need for that bigger Wi-Fi project of the northwest corner.
Well, I think that's where I was going, is like, before you just go say, let's just do this, and not think about, I mean,
The bigger
because
picture.
do we eventually need it at the town garage? I don't know.
They have Wi-Fi?
They have internet Wi-Fi, yeah.
But there's no fiber.
No, not-
They didn't get those.
Did not get connected.
But that, pulling fiber from the firehouse to
Would be,
nothing.
but that would be just good to know,
Yeah.
just to see what, as the infrastructure builds, that we look at the whole infrastructure, not just,
Right,
the
yeah,
pieces.
not pieces and parts. So I can talk to the, I forget what the acronym is, but the people who are working on the larger
the big
picture
broadband
in
picture.
the
Mhm.
northwest corner.
Okay,
Welcome, welcome.
Can I come?
Come
I'm
join
early.
us.
I'm never early. It's Valentine's Day.
Joyce, before we get started, just on the equipment, are we all,
There's a contract for a copier that expires within that budget year, so
Yeah.
anticipating a new lease might go up a little bit, I made an adjustment.
and you anticipate the expenditure of 10 grand, because we're only halfway there?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Another nice spreadsheet.
Oh my God.
I didn't make
Dewey
it.
Decimal System.
I didn't make it. So what I'm giving you is a bunch of stuff. This first thing is a very condensed version. This should be about a 12-page document. Also with that, so it generally would report on all 165 municipalities in the town, in the state of Connecticut. And it would tell you, it would just go further on and on and on and on, really detailed. So this is part of the state report that the library puts together every year and submits to the state, and then the state sends it back and gives us everything of every library and every town and yada yada. And what I did was to make it a little more relevant
Mhm.
to what it is that we're gonna be talking about today, is I filtered it by this population of the service for each population of each town. I used 1,300 to 6,000 to try to make sure I got Cornwall in there and Litchfield in there, which I felt like were important. And then I also ranked them with the wealth rank, because that is also a factor. There's lots of little small towns that are just poor, 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 and it's not fair for us to compare ourselves to something like that. So I limited it to the top 66 that were also small towns. So what we have is a very condensed version of a statewide description of what libraries do and where they get their income, what kind of programs they do, what they spend, all that sort of stuff. And it's, it's very detailed, and it's not something you're gonna look at today, but it is fairly fascinating reading, if you ever wanna look. And, one of the things, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out to you about that, but just before I do, I just wanted to let you know the other handouts. One of them is our annual report that went to the town in January. And this next is a list of, basically a narrative of our statistics for the year, all for 2019, and the financial statement that we put out also to the association for 2019. So I can give you any other things that you want. I have my copies of the most recent P&L and the most recent budget versus actuals. If you have any questions about specifics of like where the money goes or where we think the money's gonna go, I can tell you that. But generally, what comes clear in this statewide study, in this statewide pile of information, is that on average, towns support their library at a particular rate. And the state average is $48.67 per capita, is really what a town spends on the library. That's the state average. We, as the town of Kent, spend $36.09, which brings us to our $100,500 allocation that you guys very generously give us every year. So if we were to come up to the average, just merely the average in the state of Connecticut, that would put us at $135,546. Now, I have not asked for that this year. The board has not asked for that this year, but it's certainly something I want you to consider. That as a town, for as educated and diverse and interesting as we are, the town does not support the library even at the average level for the state of Connecticut. We are, as you know, an association library versus a municipal library. I know in years past, other library directors have pushed for the library to become a municipal library. I am not here to do that today. But I am asking, and the board has asked me to ask you for a raise in our annual appropriation, just to start bringing us, closer to average. We raise, as you know, a ridiculous amount of money every year on the backs of mostly our elderly population. They work really, really, really hard to raise, over $200,000 every year, every single year. Other libraries our size, even other libraries our size that are not municipal libraries, do not do that. They just don't have to, because they have big fat endowments. And we don't have a big fat endowment because we were a farming village. So, for example, Salisbury, which is a very similar town to us in demographics and in size and everything, their library has a big fat endowment that throws them lots and lots of money every year.
Do you know the amount?
Yeah, it's on your thing. So if we look on the Salisbury line and we go to income and revenue, yes, so, let me make sure I got it on the right page. Income from their endowments and their investments is $125,000. That's more than half of our fundraising every year that they just get as a, because they're trustafarians,
Where
right?
where are you seeing that? I'm sorry.
That is on the 4th page, the very first column. It says income from endowment investments. It's in a blue column. It's the very first one.
This is income revenue.
Income from endowment and investments on the very first column down. I think it's the 4th page of this for me.
So I see
Yeah.
Okay, and then
125,000.
That's what they get. And see where we are? 0. And I don't know that number is always, that number's not always 0. Some years we do take from our endowment, but generally we take, well, it's not really our endowment. We take from our sort of investments. There's not, our official endowment, we haven't had that even for a full year.
But they also have 62% of their population that has library cards, and we only have 41%.
That is true.
So what do you
That
do
is
to
true.
get that number up?
We have changed the way we solicit all of our constituents. And that number is just, it's rising every year, but as we shrink, it's, you know, it's this percentage is roughly the same, but we do lose numbers in people, cause we're losing people. And it's just constantly reinforcing that need for everyone to be, get a library card and care about what we're doing and care about, supporting the library. We push that hard. Every year there's a library card month, and we send out mailings and all that sort of stuff, so.
Well, it's just interesting, because Norfolk is 81%, Bethlehem 84%,
Yep.
Sharon only 40%, Sherman 38%.
So it seems a wide variation.
Yeah,
And
for
do
sure.
you have any, like, thoughts as to why that,
Well,
a
one
wide
of the
variation?
things that some libraries do is automatic renewals of people's library cards, and we don't do that. People have to make an effort. So, for example, I haven't looked up your library cards, but it's very possible. Yeah, but it's very possible you have expired library cards. Just
Oh, very possible.
right. So, and it's if you don't renew it every year, or they can also have longer library card lengths of, I don't know what the
Their
word
cycle.
is. Cycles, right? And so that it is not really the biggest indicator as far as, you know, for me, it's more about visits and circulation per population, and we're high in all of those
Right.
things. So as far as,
Right,
you know,
so library
yeah.
card doesn't correlate
right,
to
so
your
if they
activity.
if their library cards never expire, and the library
Right.
can come up with their own policy for that number is not really
It looks like maybe Goshen's never expired. At
It's
104%.
at 104%. Yeah, they've got some seriously ghost patrons.
So that would be interesting to see, not that I'm asking you to do this, but it would
Right.
be interesting to see that percentage and then what their,
Well, I look
expiration
at library visits per capita, which is on the very first page in that second blue column.
Right.
You know, the state average is 5.3. We are 16.2,
Yeah,
and
that's-
there you go. Salisbury, they're only at 14.2.
Yeah, but you
Done.
could have one person walk in 17 times.
So connect.
Well, I know they can, but.
It's the same
but-
thing.
No, I know they can, but typically, especially if you have a reduced volume of people, it is those people turning in and in. Which leads to the argument that is in town, is why is this library alive if indeed only a certain amount of people use it and I don't?
Sure.
I'm not saying that it's the correct assumption, but that it is
Yes.
one of the things
Right.
put forward,
And
so.
I would say that that is the choice of the town. Oh, any town has to decide if they value this type of service being available.
Well, I'm gonna go back to your point about the endowment.
Right.
So clearly, in Salisbury, those same people of 62%
Right.
who continue to visit are supporting that library such that there's an endowment.
No, not necessarily. The
Well-
endowment's quite old. And Salisbury as a town ranks much higher than us. They're 9th in the state of Connecticut as far as wealth, and we
Mhm.
are a measly 33.
Mhm.
So their libraries were endowed a really long time ago, and that's really what makes the difference.
Well,
It's
the
not necessarily that the money's coming in. They do raise a fair amount of money in Salisbury, I'm not saying that they don't. But because they have that influx of old endowment income,
They're-
it takes the heat off.
This wealth ranking is based on what?
It's a state ranking.
Is it based on their?
Property values.
Right, so,
et cetera, et cetera.
so just because a town has higher property values means it's wealthier, it does not mean to say that a citizen, the average citizen is necessarily wealthy.
Sure,
So.
sure, but you have to come up with some way to delineate
Well, sometimes they
how
do,
they rank. I mean,
they do household income, they do average, so there are other manners in which.
my impression of this wealth ranking, I don't generate it, it's
Yeah,
generated
no, I
by
know,
the
I
state, is that they do use a lot of factors. It's not just
Mhm.
property values. I don't know, and we can look into that if you like. But
Right.
it certainly goes back to the point of certain towns that have association libraries versus municipal libraries, like Torrington, for example. Torrington is a small city, but they have an association library. They don't get their money from their town at all. Little bits, little dribs and drabs. And you think about Torrington, that would make sense that population would have this, tax-based library system. It doesn't. They have a humongous endowment that generates all their money. And that's because a long time ago, Torrington had a lot of money. Or at least a few wealthy people in Torrington had a lot of money and endowed this lovely library, and that's it. So we're working on the endowment, and the hope is that, we've got this big anniversary coming up, our big centennial, and we've got goals and we're pushing forward. But until all of that giant endowment that we'd love to have is actually there, we fundraise. And we
So
have
what is your
money
endowment
fundraise.
presently?
Well, the official endowment is, like the legal endowment is, I think, a little bit under $200,000. So, but it's much higher. It didn't exist before last March.
Well, I know for, what was it, 4 or 5 years, Ken Cooper was doing that whole programming system designed to create
Well,
a
the hope
capital
was
push.
to be, yeah, so, and interestingly enough, I guess, the town, I wasn't there, but on Monday they had a guy, Frank Way, come and do some branding exercises with the town, and that sort of came up as far
Very
as that. I'm all for what's going on there, but a little library tidbit came up about that lecture series, and that lecture series was so high profile and so fancy that it actually turned a lot of people off from supporting the library because, well, if the library has money to do something like that, they don't need my money. And in reality, that wasn't the goal at all. That was more about bringing up our profile. And when it came time, we had just put together a building program. We were talking about what was going to be next. Were we going to be able to do something great with the firehouse property, etc. And then the market tanked, and it just went away. And again, we're back in the flow. We have a new building program committee. They're meeting at the end of the month. We are thinking forward, all of those things. But the lecture series was kind of a double-edged sword. It's still important to do, and we are always working on developing programs that will be interesting and informative and put Kent on the map.
Can you talk a minute about your apps, the ebook?
Yeah,
telling me about the other day.
right, so a year and a half ago, we added streaming services, which we've never had before, and we're a little late to the game. A lot of libraries have been doing it for a while, but it's a line item in the budget, and our budget's always been really tight. But I pushed pretty hard for adding streaming services. We have a limited footprint, how many books we can possibly buy without throwing out books, right? So it just made sense to start funneling money that we already had. If we were gonna spend X amount of dollars on books, why don't we spend X minus this on physical books and use some of that money towards streaming services? Because we don't have to house them. People can just use them. So interestingly enough, the way that the statistics have borne out, it shows that the physical audiobooks in particular have dropped just a little bit, but the streaming has gone through the roof. So much so that we actually had to cap it last year because it was so much more than we thought people would use. And it's just become clear that these are people that weren't being served, that weren't using the library because they didn't want to be messing around with CDs, and they didn't think about it that way, or they were already using Audible and paying for it, or they were using other types of things they were paying for. And so they basically became new library users. And people were coming in and saying, well, I need to update my card because it won't let me use Hoopla, and it won't let me use Overdrive. And then now my kid needs a card. And a lot of people who would only have one family card, because it's a little easier to manage sometimes, would suddenly be like, well, now my kids need cards because they get a certain number of downloads per month. And so it became clear that streaming is definitely a way that the library can serve the next crew of people, bring in more people to be involved with what's going on. Yeah, it's great.
It's exciting.
It is exciting. It's what's nice, and what's nice is that the technology, certainly Hoopla, which is a little expensive, we pay per download, is very user friendly. Overdrive, which is something that we've been subscribing to for a long time, is not so user friendly, but they have changed their software to offer something a little bit easier. It's called Libby. And it's the same pile of information, same books and such, but they've made it more user friendly because basically it became clear that as it was more and more popular and people who aren't necessarily as technologically savvy, to wade through the steps for Overdrive, it's like a 7-step process to get a book. But if you use Hoopla or Libby, just like on Amazon, one click and you're in. One click, and so it's all becoming much easier. We still get patrons who come in, and they get a phone just for that. my kid told me I need to start listening to books on my phone, but I don't know how to turn it on. And so, we work through that too.
Sarah,
That's great.
Yes.
is it appropriate for me to add something?
Mhm.
I've been working on the development committee of the library for the last 2 years, and we've been working very, very hard. And I've also been doing a lot of research into the history of the library, looking at the earliest minutes when the association was formed in 1915. And one of the things that's very, very striking that addresses some of the issues that Chris raised is that the very beginnings of the Kent Library were so different from Gunn in Washington, from Hotchkiss in Sharon, from Scoville in Salisbury, because Kent did not have any very, very wealthy restaurants.
Didn't have a Scoville, a gun.
Right,
Just
exactly,
thinking it was
exactly.
It was a little farming town.
Mhm.
And when you look at how the money was raised to build that little jewel box of a library, it was
Nickels
bake
and dimes,
sales
it was
and
bake sales, yeah.
raffles and, I mean, you name it. It was so different from one single family throwing money. And it's sort of the history of this town in many respects. So
We
from
think
the
about
very
even the
beginning-
original firehouse, that on our property, that was built by the fire department,
By
people,
volunteers,
volunteers.
basically.
They laid those cement bricks, they did that all themselves.
So those issues really have continued through the history of the library, and that's one of the things in anticipation of the 100th anniversary that the development committee and the board is trying to address.
Mhm.
How do we get the broader community to make a bigger investment in the endowment of the library?
Well, grants are normally designed not to be a specific endowment every year. It's designed, for the most part, not
Right.
always, to support from the town, to help them get on the feet. So the question that I've always asked of all of them, and in fact, in my time here, I think it's only been the, was it a V&A that we did, that came up, was it V&A? That asked to be removed because they had finally gotten
Kent
it.
Nursing
Kent
Association.
Nursing, thank
And
you.
then they merged
They
with the
merged.
community.
Because they
right?
moved, yeah, more. I see that your operating is we're about a third of your operating expenditures, of which 60% of that is your personnel.
Yes,
Now, to be fair, the library has dropped from a height of almost 70% on average down to 60%. So
Right,
clearly
so-
you're working on trying to control those costs.
right, and part of, they're a little skewed this year because of the big renovation. So that, raised a particular line, and, we're not dealing with a massive amount of money, so when you spend an extra $20,000 on a renovation, it sort of skews all of
Right,
your
but this
stuff.
is just personnel I'm talking about.
Yes, so, that, and, that's pretty standard for nonprofits, is roughly 3/4 of your expenditures should be personnel.
Okay.
If you see, again, when you look at what we do as far as programming versus other libraries, we have massive amounts of programming that other libraries do not do, and that is expressly because we have the personnel to do it. If you ever go in Cornwall Library, it's really, really pretty and cute, and there's no people in there, because they don't offer much. So the people in Cornwall come to us, people in Warren come to us, people in Sherman come to us, because there's always something going on, and that is because we have the staff. The staff puts on the programs, and that's not even something I could do. I'm too busy dealing with the financials and dealing with the constituencies and working through, even though it's not necessarily my job to run all the fundraisers, everything has to funnel through somebody. Somebody has to be that hub. So I spend a lot of time, in my office dealing with all of these sort of other ways that we're getting income. The programs are run by the staff. They are run by the staff, and they're active and they're healthy. Particularly the early children's programs are healthy, and we're about to expand into a bigger array of elderly programs as our town shifts. When we'll be working very closely with Templeton Farms, we're talking about having like a little satellite library over there that we'll keep updating with new materials. We've got some old computer equipment I'm hoping that we can get over there so they can request books and check out books for people who can't make it over to where we are.
At the senior center.
At the senior center, and they will have some staffing support too, which will help any issues that arise over there. So, the programs and reaching out and bringing people into our building and us getting out of that building and interacting is where that money goes, is where the actual staffing line item is spent. And that is, as far as I'm concerned, having, you know, a library user and a lover of what goes on in all of Northwest Corner, I'm the proudest of that. I think we do a lot in our community and do a lot of fabulous programs.
Getting back to the endowment, what's the magic number that starts throwing off good money for you?
Well, gosh, you know, our spending policy is 5%.
Okay,
So $200,000 a year, that's 10 grand. That's
Yeah,
nothing.
okay.
So 2 million. And that's gonna take some time, but that's where, you know, that and, you know, infusing $100,000 into our budget would make a massive difference, of course. And we're not there yet. There are people in town that could fund it. If they wanted to, they could write a check. They haven't done it yet. It doesn't mean we haven't been working on developing those relationships, but it's not there yet.
but do you have an actual capital campaign, an endowment campaign?
It's in the works. Yes. So last year we did a feasibility study, and we looked the idea that we presented to this group of people. There were about 25 interviews done across our different constituencies, and it was done by Sharon Donofsky. We got a grant from Northwest Connecticut Community Fund to help fund it. Plus, it was also funded privately, and she helped us organize this whole big feasibility study that said. It talked about, you know, this is our library, this is what we do, and this is what we'd like to do. And we said we would like to raise our endowment. We'd like to go up to at least $1 million. I think that was the number. And $2 million for the endowment. That's right. I had it backwards. $2 million for the endowment and $1 million for other, you know, bricks and mortar kind of projects.
Capital campaign.
Yes, but specifically the firehouse and maintaining our building. And it was received well, but not to that extent, not financially. We didn't get the financial support that we wanted to with that type of program. However, these participants said, what are you doing with the firehouse? If you talk about developing that property, then it became clear that there was much more money on the table, maybe more like 3 to 5, to do something with a building. So that's where we are now. Now the board has accepted the results of that study. We've gone back to the feasibility study participants. We've told them, you know, what the consensus was, and there's some excitement there. But we need a new building plan, a new building program, because we haven't done one since '08. That committee, as I said, is formed and meeting at the end of the month to start. And by the end of this calendar year, we plan to have a building program. That's not architectural drawings necessarily. But we will have a plan in place of what's going to happen to the entire footprint of the library. And if the building program decides nothing, well then that's where we'll go. But we're working with an architect who also works with nonprofits and helps them guide their building programs. And he's about to join the board. His name is Sam Calloway. And my hope is we do something exciting. Part of that campaign, though, will also be an endowment piece. For sure, because we have to be able to pay for this building. If we build something or do something with that space, it's going to raise all of our costs. Not necessarily our staffing costs, which are our biggest line item, but of course, heat and paint and maintenance.
One of the big issues when I was a selectman in 2000 was parking.
Yep.
There is no parking for the
Right.
library
Right.
whatsoever.
Right, and there's no parking now,
So
really,
if you
and there's
expand your
sure.
buildings and everything else, there's still not gonna be any
Correct.
parking.
So it's not going to get any worse.
That's correct.
Yeah,
And just to read
but
you
it's certainly not
something,
gonna get any
in
better.
2001, this is how, when Chris talks about eventually an endowment, erasing things and so people can be on their own, it never seems to happen in Kent where people raise enough of money in an endowment. And I'll read you this. This was the budget we received in 2001. It said, I'd like to direct your attention to the last line in the budget regarding the endowment fund balance. This was from the library. We have made significant progress in this area, anticipate even more such progress next year, and are well on our way toward our $1 million goal.
Nice.
I would also like to mention that our fundraising efforts this year have been directed almost entirely toward increasing the endowment fund and less toward raising operating expense funds. So
Yeah.
now we're 2020 and we're still
right.
which I understand, that's how it works, nothing ever seems to get better.
Well, it is getting better.
It is now,
yeah,
but
yeah.
they
No.
thought it was too in 2001.
Right, we've got a really active board.
No, I'm not
Yeah.
knocking the board at all, what
Yeah.
I'm saying is that
Sure.
every
It's been an
committee
issue
has
for
a
a
great
long time.
term of
Yep.
leadership, and then it kinda
Yeah.
disappears, and I don't know where your endowment fund is, but, so at one point, they were almost toward their $1 million goal in 2001.
I don't know, actually,
Well,
that's
that's what
true, but
they wrote to
we
us.
didn't
You know what I'm saying?
we didn't have a legal endowment at
Right.
that time. We've only had one for a year, roughly
Right.
a year, so that was,
It
board
was basically
directed.
a reserve fund.
It was a reserve
Right.
fund, yeah.
Right, okay.
So, and honestly, I don't know what the number was at that time, but,
It doesn't say that here.
yeah.
But
But nevertheless,
but what I'm saying is the big issue back then, I remember, was expanding the library without parking.
Sure.
That was the problem. And that's why when I started on the building committee for the Kent Center School, we made a bigger library at Kent Center School. Because at that point, they were really struggling and they weren't sure if this was even gonna stay in existence.
Yeah, there was,
So-
certainly in the building, the
That's correct.
building program I was around for in
Yeah.
08, they talked about a different space.
Yep, so that's why we put the separate entrance at the Kent Center School on the east side.
Oh, nice,
So if this library ever went under
interesting.
and decided to move, because there was plenty of parking down on that
Right.
side, they could use that separate entrance into the Kent Center School on the back side. So,
Well, I don't feel like we're in any danger
No.
of closing.
I know, but parking is an issue though.
Parking is an issue, but as I said, it's not gonna get any worse, cause it's pretty much non-existent.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
okay,
Well, and it sounds to me that the way libraries are going, it's less about parking and going into your
Right,
library.
yeah.
It's, there's interactive things.
yeah,
Right, you're not
And-
necessarily building your customer base that is gonna be coming into your physical.
not
brick and
all of
mortars.
them,
And
no,
even if the old
no.
firehouse gets renovated, they're not making it into
Right.
a bigger
More
wing of the library. It's gonna
Right.
be a sort of probably a mixed media kind of concept. So, I'm not concerned about that. What my focus is getting off the endowment-based program that comes from the taxpayer
The
to
allocation,
the endowment as an independent. Clearly, that's gonna take a long time.
And,
But we wanna see, I would like to see what the plan is, what the time frame is in which to gain your $2 million. And I know that's a
good
challenge.
question.
I know,
Yeah,
but,
yeah, and that's a question for the board, not even for me. So,
right, but so as an example, you drive through all these small towns and you see the thermometer.
right,
I've never seen a thermometer other than, I don't know, projects here and there, but an endowment thermometer type of
right, well,
mindset.
right, but we're not raising money, we're not currently starting a capital campaign that has an endowment. When we went to our biggest donors and said, would you help us build an endowment right now, they said, meh,
Okay,
we'll help you a little bit.
but
but-
you do an annual pledge.
We do, and
Is
that's,
that part of your fundraising?
yes, every year.
Okay. Is it not appropriate to maybe take a percentage of that and put it into your endowment?
Well, anytime we have excess funds at the end of the year, we can roll into our endowment, absolutely. If we, this year, you can see what we spent, you can see what we earned. If there's money left over, the board always has the opportunity to roll more money into our endowment.
And do they, or?
Well, some years,
It says-
right, as you can see, as recently as 2016, we were running a deficit. This past year, we had a lot of nice investments from our constituents. People rolling their money directly into our endowment, and that's wonderful.
And that's that $75,000.
That was right. And then we pulled money out. We had Catherine and maybe somebody else did a major dive into all of our archives to figure out what amount of our money that was in our sort of board directed reserve fund really should be legally endowment. Because if somebody says they gave to an endowment, it has to be put into the endowment. So Catherine, what was it, 40 man hours going
I
through
wasn't involved in that, but there was a lot of work.
a lot of work to figure out what money that really legally people thought they were giving to an endowment, that we then created an actual endowment. And since then, we've had some more donations to that, and we're thrilled.
There's a lot of organizational work that's being done that sort of has to be done before you can take that
Right,
next step of
right.
during a campaign.
Right, and it's a board right now that doesn't see a lot of turnover. It's people that have made long-term commitments to working on these sort of projects. And that's been helpful because as you know, once you're working on these committees, it takes time. It takes time to get all these busy people together and make these decisions. So the fact that we have a lot of forward motion is because of that very thing, because the board is just determined to see this through.
The grants line, 56,500, what is that, where's that funded?
Oh, well, 40 of it was from you. For the 40,
So the town of Kent.
the
at
town of
top.
Kent grants was the extra $40,000 that you guys gave us to do the project
In
last
this
year.
line item here, we gave him $40,000 to
Oh,
redo the
okay.
floors.
And then what the other 16 was, I'd have to dig deep, but they were other grants that we solicited from other organizations.
That's why
Okay,
the
so
line
you
item's
don't-
so out of whack.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you don't, in a normal,
The state gives
how
him
often?
$300.
The state gets nothing, we get very little from the
Right.
state, and federally, we're about to lose even more. So, you know, that we need our towns to support us, we need our local tax base to
And
support
do
us.
you go out, are you on the hunt for grants?
Always.
Do you have, yeah,
Oh,
Yeah, that's,
I do see them come up, so now that I know,
yeah,
I'll float
yeah,
them.
Maria, and we have a staff member who does that as part of her job
Oh,
now,
okay.
and they're even talking about if we need to, start committing even more time to grant writing, there's talk of hiring another part-time person to just be just grants, so.
I don't think I have any other questions.
Well, you can
Anybody else?
chew on these stats, and you can certainly find me, you know where I am, I'm not hiding. If you have questions for me, go ahead and fire
This is
away.
great. And
I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to tell you.
I think the simple takeaway is it's just an asking for a $5,000 increase. Let's boil it down to that.
As it's 10,
I'm sorry, 10.
yep,
That's right.
yep, that's what
So
the
that's
board
really
wants
what
to do, is ask for a little bit more, and to bring us up to state averages, slowly, we hope.
Can you just jot those, there were a couple of numbers that you talked about in the beginning, that it looked like you were taking off of that,
Yes.
yeah.
So, the filters that I did, that's one of the things here, and the well crank, so I filtered for population and I filtered for well crank. The state average, is $48.67, $48.67 per capita is what libraries spend on this as a state average, and ours is at $36.09.
And what's the difference between administrative and personnel? On your
Um,
line? What would be
you
an
know,
example of an administrative?
Administrative costs, maybe? I'm trying to think of how I write that, how I fill that.
Because you've
blank.
got 20,
I think that's sort of like,
It's programmatic work
it's
versus
programmatic work
administrative work.
versus administrative work, and then it's also, no, but I mean, the way you have to do these statistics, there's all sorts of little formulas you have to follow. Which page is that one on?
I'm sorry, it's on the revenue page.
Okay,
So on the expense side,
so personnel is purely salary. And
okay.
administrative are anything that's not, basically anything that's not tech.
Yeah, I
That's
see
the
that.
one where it sort of falls into all the leftover types of things that the cost that we have to administer, all the stuff that we do.
So is
So,
it human work hours?
no, that's all personnel. Human work
So-
hours is all under personnel.
Right, so
Administrative is cost, so it's fees and copiers and insurance, and we gotta pay a lot of money for insurance. Insurance alone is like 10 grand.
It's just a,
It's sort of where everything else falls into
it's
the
a
administration.
tough word
I know.
to use,
It is.
administrative, sounds like you're actually doing man hours for it.
No, personnel is all,
So it should,
that.
well, you can do your own budgets anyway. I think that clarifies it, thank you.
so that's sort of where everything else, that's not programs, materials,
Mhm.
technology, personnel, maintenance and repairs, utilities, administrative is that leftover costs of just doing business. One number I did generate, which was a little disturbing, was just the fundraising expenses, or our 21,693, that's how much it costs to raise the money that we raise. which, you know, we raised 200,
200,000.
it's 10%, it's a pretty good turnover,
It's
but
actually
you,
not
Yeah,
bad.
that's
but you
not
still
bad
think
return.
about that, like what we're investing in just, you know, keeping that book sale running and keeping the car raffle going and keeping the benefit party going and all that sort of stuff. It's a lot.
And
It's the age and the
But that's when
the volunteer time, which to me is just massive. It's a massive number.
you don't monetize the volunteer hours that are put into, so that's a
Pure.
very, very, very
It's,
conservative.
yeah, it's well over 5,000 hours a year of volunteer hours, and the majority of what they're doing is fundraising activities.
Mhm.
You know, the occasional other things. We have some people who do programming help. We have some people who work at the desk, like Jan Bourne comes in and works at the desk every Thursday, just, you know. But most of it is slinging books
Right.
at the book sale and hawking tickets at the car raffle. And, you know, if I told Ed Epstein that he wasn't allowed to sell car raffle tickets, he might even get mad at me. But
Yeah.
it's still a lot. It's a lot. So particularly the book sale. And that, for as far as I'm concerned, is beneficial to the library, but is also very beneficial to the town, because boy, does it bring a vibrancy to Main Street.
Right.
That's important.
Interesting.
The book sale, we do plan on making sure that there's always a book sale because of what it does for all of us as a community. You know, bringing money into the library is one thing, but also a way to harness volunteers in a way that they really enjoy. And people love books, a place for people to give their books, which they love like their babies. And people feel like if they give it to the book sale, it's not throwing it away. Right? It's funny. And then you add to what it brings to Main Street, and you look at, anytime you see an advertising thing about come to Kent, you see a picture of trees, see a picture of the falls, and you see a picture of the book sale. It's adorable. What other questions, anything for me?
I think we're done.
Okay.
I'm great,
Thanks
thanks.
so much.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate it.
Sure,
Valentine's
sure.
Keep up the good work.
Thanks, guys.
What are we on next?
Let's see. We're gonna-
Back to the Mick. Smart Park.
What are we on next?
Park and Rec. Page 7.
Is that hazelnut coffee?
It is. Sorry.
Oh, different.
Hazelnut coffee with some cinnamon.
Oh, yeah.
Shaped cinnamon. Oh, that's right. It's your like favorite thing in the whole wide world is flavored.
Flavor coffee.
And I lost her. Lynn is here, but I lost her.
And come all the way up would be great. Thank you.
Morning, how you feeling?
Okay.
You gotta stop hella skiing.
Did you get to the summit of Mount Everest? Did you? No, I didn't try to.
Next
story.
time.
Or the you should see the other guy.
Didn't think about that one.
He's visiting.
Yeah.
So this budget doesn't have the request of $6,000 that's in front of us, correct?
I don't believe
I don't
so.
see it.
Right, because I think
I don't
this
see
came
it.
out
This came
before.
up, guys.
Good morning, how are you? How are you? So take us through, this is.
Do you have any questions?
Well, I figured we would just, so do you wanna talk about the, this request first? Do you wanna talk?
Let's go budget first,
Okay.
that's okay.
Well, it's a slight increase,
Mm-hmm.
and that's based on, nothing looks changing there. Operations, I guess slightly, is what we got it.
Yep, so
So
there's
it looks like fee programs,
little, fee programs, so we have a new Runs Escape program.
okay, fee program's a fee program, right?
Yep.
It's just an offset.
So we bumped that up a little, cover our ice time.
Yep.
There's a slight increase in hourly employees, which reflects the increase in minimum wage.
Oh, I see, yep,
About $500.
yep,
give or
yep,
take. And other than
And 15, so water and sewer is
that, water
just
and sewer's just a little
budgeted,
bit,
cause it
yep.
just never know. Okay,
Wait, where's the minimum wage? I'm seeing the same
I don't
number
have-
for,
We don't have the budget that you have in front of you, but it's under hourly employees,
yeah, I have that,
That's up in the top portion.
right.
so it's like $500 difference over the current.
Barbara didn't upgrade any salaries
Oh.
yet, so you're seeing the flat
Okay, that's
across.
why I'm seeing,
She's gonna work
Same
on the
number.
budget, so what you're looking at
Gotcha.
doesn't reflect what Leslie's
Okay.
talking about.
but it's a slight increase.
and your, postage, just, I'm just interested in what everybody's uses their
What we
postage
use
for.
our postage for. Correspondence, mailing out after-school bills for people who are drop-in who don't come every week.
Mhm.
Mailing for bus trips for seniors, theater trips. Things like that,
Okay.
office work.
And mileage, is this for,
Conferences, workshops, meetings out of town, it's anything out of town, nothing in town.
mhm. And, park maintenance, your year-to-date is only 3514, does it get,
Our spring is our busy time,
so
so.
it gets all,
Yep.
it's normally
Mhm.
backloaded? And do you, do the parks get inspected annually or semi-annually, or anything
I
for
mean,
safety?
yeah,
By us.
by us.
Oh, so they don't, are you all certified in some sort of?
If-
I went to
if
the annual Kerma meeting and there was talk
Mhm.
about,
Kermit has come
park
out.
inspections and
Mhm.
it might, I think it would make sense for us to,
Kermit has come out and walked around with us and looked at playgrounds and stuff, so.
Annually or just,
It's not really every other, but, they've been here a couple times, and then we've done, things that obviously you can see that need to be done, so I'll keep on
I think it would make sense to, check with Kerma and we can,
what happens
do
in
like
the
iCall,
spring.
who,
Yep.
is our contact up there.
well, but that leads to the bigger question of our places all looked at. Does town hall get a look?
That's what I was wondering, yeah.
Does the community house get an inspection every year?
Of
Does the town
building
garage?
inspection?
Yeah, or whatever inspection we're thinking.
Well, I assume that the
Sorry. to
buildings
this.
were inspected and we have a fire marshal who is regularly in the buildings,
I just,
But
if
I'm
you're
talking
asking, if you're
about
talking about an annual,
I'm talking about playground equipment that's exposed to the elements and is not seen and lived in every single day. And there was a talk about, are you making sure that your recreation, your parks and recreation, playgrounds and off-site, recreation are, safe? And so from a liability and risk perspective, that was one of the sort of pinch points that gets doesn't always get attended to in towns.
well, I would imagine that would be
Versus a town
insurance
building.
driven. So our insurance cover provider would have those stipulations, I would think.
Yeah, I don't
I mean,
know if,
and so, and just for historical purposes, Park and Recreation used to run the community house as an example,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah, but I
You
think
just bring
it's
up a
apples
good
and
question, you bring up a
oranges
good
of
question, and I think it's something, and I just pulled back on a macro level, thinking, what are we doing generally speaking on an annual basis?
Are you saying because the community house is used by the public?
Mm,
I'm more talking about because the unique, that a playground is unique versus here's a building that's used by the town, there's a building that's used by the town, the town garage is the building that gets used by the town, the Swift houses get. It's a building versus playground equipment.
well,
So,
I think
it's
just
worth
brings up a question.
looking into,
I mean, we have done work on our playground like every year recently, so, and we just had a tree inspection and got tree bids for tree work that needs to be
Good.
done, so that kind of stuff is being done, so, but, and maybe not.
Maybe just formalizing it every year, it's like, it was inspected,
yeah, that's
Yeah,
exactly.
definitely.
emails out.
That's exactly right. And I think it builds trust in people who are coming to use the playground. You know, if it's posted on the website that,
They were just all
safety
clean,
inspected
too.
and,
These
Power
nests are
wash.
out of the little,
right, all the nooks and
Swings.
crannies. Uh-oh.
Good morning here.
And do you keep numbers on, like year over year, how many participants are in the different programs? And do you like look at that to build the programs or see which programs are high functioning programs that, oh, maybe we need to, build on this type of program and, offer something else?
We are starting to do some of those things per some conversations we've had with Chris in the last administration.
Mhm.
So yes, this year we are starting to keep a little bit more data, that exact thing.
Because that's what's gonna, data's gonna be how you tell your story.
I don't
well, also, to be blank, straightforward, when you say, we're cutting this program, and everyone screams, why? It's because there are only 4 kids who are gonna play.
Right.
So you're like,
That's what I
okay,
mean by
here's your
telling the
rationale,
story. Yep.
and I know you're not happy, but it doesn't make sense that Park and Rec resources go to 4 children,
Right.
and then,
Telling
maybe,
all
and then
different
have an
sides of the
alternative.
story.
I think we pretty much do that. I don't think we keep programs that aren't worthwhile or only attracting a few kids. And a lot of times programs are turned away because we set up a registration or a pre-registration type thing first, and not enough people are interested, so we don't do it.
Mhm.
And I think the ones that we do have are pretty well attended, and we're working on getting them more attended. I mean, we can't help it. There's only less than 200 kids in the school or whatever, but we do our best with it.
On the flip side, going to the fee program, not the fee program, well, the classes that outside people teach and then they get the 90%, we keep the 10. We just started an easy Tai Chi class on Tuesday mornings for more senior citizen age people. And that class did so well, the instructor came and said, hey, we wanna expand that and have a second class a week, could we meet on Thursdays? And,
So how many people are enrolled in that, the first one?
I believe we had 12 or 14. And then he's got probably about that many that are the new session starts next week. So, if you look on the budget under, where is it on there, on the classes, we've well exceeded our classes, so we were budgeted to bring in 500, our share we brought in to date, was 784 when I got this budget worksheet. So, in that area, we're doing really, really well. So it's filling a need for a different population than, some of the more traditional sports offerings.
Where's that offered?
Community house,
Community house?
yep, and then they're gonna also use St. Andrews, cause, community house isn't always available on Thursdays, so.
Do you have to pay a fee when you use St. Andrews, or do they?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
gonna, a few dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that gets rolled into the cost of the program.
Exactly.
Right.
It's come
Yeah, no,
off.
I was just wondering.
And user
Yep.
pays for it.
Yep, exactly, it'll come off the instructor.
We still get our
Yeah,
percentage.
we still get our 10%, and the instructor will get a little bit less, so.
And so are we only using the the big room in the community
Mhm.
house? And there's no thought of using the lower?
I don't think that floor will be conducive to, we pretty much use upstairs, I guess is the easy answer.
A lot of the instructors request, they can't,
A
they
wooden
say they
floor.
can't work on something.
Yeah, concrete floor, yeah.
So, do we have a copy of that, of your proposed budget? I only see
We
the.
don't, I don't,
Okay.
you know, you have more copies of that?
Copy
But
of,
you're,
Yeah, that,
This?
yeah.
and I don't
Can you-
care,
Can you have a
Actually,
copy?
let me just see this one, sorry, Jean. This doesn't have the director's salary.
No.
This doesn't either, I apologize. All right, so as it except for the director's salary should just reflect 3%, that's what the commission asked for.
Can I just write?
Yes,
this
go
down?
ahead.
Okay.
It's already in the proposal.
Thank you.
Which,
There's that on there.
It's in the,
no, it's supposed to be. This is the copy I sent to the commission before they met. Like I say, I don't have
Okay.
a copy of whatever Barbara gave
Do
me.
you wanna talk about your,
Parks master plan, or do you wanna do all fields? Whichever, doesn't matter. We have to do both anyway.
yeah, let's do ball field first.
So basically, you guys know that it was the fields and the lease were handed over to Park and Rec.
yes, it was.
So, we are asking for.
What page are we on, sorry? Ball fields
We-
is that under something separate, or did you put it under?
I asked to have it moved to Park and Rec, I don't know what happened.
Oh, we can, we'll have to ask Barbara.
Thanks,
But what page is ball field, it's under the,
Thank you.
Oh, it's at the bottom of page 7.
Yeah, ball field.
oh, there it is hiding there.
What does that say?
20,000.
So yeah, we had what, 5,000 already in on.
59.55.
Board of Selectmen budget,
Oh, in the budget, yeah, and there's 59.55 spent year to date
and
as
then
of 120.
we have to take over the conditioning, or is that what it's called, the conditioning that the Kent School was doing, turf management?
Mhm.
So that was around 4, and then, cause they gave that up,
Mhm.
that had nothing to do, the town would have had that in your budget line anyway, that has nothing to do with the change. And then, because it hasn't had updating in a few years, it needs some extra work this year till we can get it back up to par. And we can have real fields and the kids aren't tripping and, the importance of good fields, so,
Mhm.
Let me
that's,
just interject for a second,
Yep.
just so we can catch you up from the last go-round. This all came about because this was basically maintained by Bruce, in effect, and an agreement between Bruce and Kent Center School,
Mhm.
okay?
And Kent's School.
No, well, Kent School
Right.
was doing mowing, because
Right.
they own the fields down there. They said they are not gonna do that anymore, so they begged off. And then Kent Center School said they weren't gonna take care of it, even though they used it. And so Park and Rec really had nothing to do with it other than maintaining the clay and a few other things down at the ball fields all the way down. And so now, we made the determination to, with Bruce gone, move it into under Park and Recs. Now, they did not want to really take it on, but they have taken this mantle on. So this is new to you guys, and they're going to deal with it as best they can.
So let me just interject to add to what Lynn said. We, Park and Rec, established a playing field subcommittee, which used to exist. In more recent years, it's pretty much just been Bruce. So we have reestablished that subcommittee. There are 3 people on there, Bruce, Marty Lindenmeyer representing the school, and John Grant for Park and Rec. So they put this work out to bid, we got bids, they met, they went over the bids, they made a recommendation to the commission accepted their recommendation, and, that is what that price is based on. We just didn't pluck it out of the air somewhere, we have, actual bids. And also.
And just so I understand, that also includes the field that Kempton School
All three,
uses primarily.
All three fields.
Because Park and Rec,
All three.
the Park and Rec programming does not occur on that first field.
Right.
Okay.
So there's a proprietary component there that Park and Rec doesn't even have any jurisdiction over, but they have to maintain it.
And that includes the playground as well.
Oh, I didn't know it was a
Yeah.
playground as well.
That's why I'm against it, I don't think
And the
Park and Rec should be involved.
It's
in
not
that.
part of
Anything
what I
that's
thought.
part
I thought it
of-
should
come
they
out of
can't-
That's
School
education.
fields, which I believe in the lease said,
No, I didn't think the playgrounds were part of that.
The playgrounds are part of that lease. Personally, I don't think that's our
I
responsibility.
don't.
I
but
think
they
it's
are
the
part of the lease,
field.
which you gave us. That was part of the thing, was that the lease was our,
Are you sure that that is part of the property? I thought that fields were only part of the property.
It is because when it came time, and I have it somewhere in my office, Chris, when it came time to re-up the lease, the town at that time went and asked about, I think, purchasing the fields or whatever, and when
No,
somebody.
I'm talking about the playground.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so when somebody went to look, they said, oh, the lease only includes the playground, it never included the playing fields that we had been using for all those years, so it had to get redone.
I remember a survey, seeing a survey, and I'd like that checked,
We can-
that,
Anyway,
yeah, I think it makes sense for it, but in any event, I think a survey would determine that. And if the lease does say, if we find out that we do own it and they don't own it, that should not be part of it.
right, that's my
And
understanding.
we should get it out of whatever leases there is.
The school, I mean, I think it's in the lease because it's technically Kent School property, so that's why it's there to be a use of it, but I personally maintain that the playground is the school's to maintain and should not be part of.
I would agree because it is,
but that'll have to be reworded then.
well, I
Because
think
we
what,
didn't understand.
I think we need to
Yeah.
find out who owns it, one.
Mhm.
Two, once we know who owns it, then we can have the fight if it's internal,
Mhm.
or if it's external, then we have to figure that out.
And I don't think there's any question about that right now between us and the school.
Right, but the $20,000 you have here is not considering the playground.
Correct.
Correct.
That's,
for playing
that's what I want to be
field.
clear about.
Yes.
Yep.
Because that playground's going to need, and Karen and volunteers put that in how long ago?
Right, I know that
15,
this.
18 years ago?
Yeah, we're not gonna go playgrounds yet, we could go on and on with playgrounds.
So can you, for the last, for the previous 2 seasons, or I guess they get used more than just the spring seasons, can you get me a list of the programs and, participants for the fields?
From Park and Rec standpoint, I can.
And we need to get one from the school. Cause I'll be honest with you, I think this should be in Park and Rec budget for the fertilizing and maintaining. the
So
fields.
what the programs are, and, I mean, if it's not obvious, like, obviously, if it says soccer, I'm gonna assume it's in the fall. If it's baseball, I'm gonna assume, I can assume it's in the spring.
That's what it'll be.
Anything that is that wouldn't be obvious, just note what time of year.
Do you want me to contact the school and ask them to provide you with that same information, or are you gonna do that? Happy to do that under
Okay,
unfilled
yeah,
auspices.
sure. And which field you're using for the program?
Well, let's back up about the fields. The reason we thought about the fields is because, one, somebody had to take ownership of it. Okay?
Right, which the school was.
No,
Well,
At the time.
somebody had to take ownership of it, one. Two, we're all gonna pay for it one way or another. Whether it comes out of the school, whether it comes out of Park and Rec, whether it comes out of.
Correct.
So what the rationale was, even though it wasn't the best solution or the most comfortable solution, was this group was an entity that was used to taking care of parks and such. Therefore, while it wasn't their choice again,
That made sense.
they
It's
had,
green space.
they had the most credentials for taking over it and maintaining it.
Well, I just feel that over the years, school got rid of the mowing
Yeah,
of it, which
Yeah.
used to be in their budget.
yeah.
And now they're getting rid of the taking care of the fields that they use, as far as the fertilizing and all that.
So let me just back up, and I don't mean to interrupt you or cut you off. This playing field subcommittee has been in existence
Right.
since we did that big $30,000
Right.
project, and since
When we
that
got this
time,
Irrigation thing
yep,
and the
right,
whole plan is
since
not
that
used.
time, that playing field committee has overseen all the work on
Right.
the field, and at that time, Rick volunteered to take over the
Right.
mowing.
Right.
So that's why the school has not been involved.
But what I'm saying is, people talk about the Board of Education budget, you know, going up and down, which has nothing to do with you. And that's why people's had questions about, well, now they're not doing the mowing, maybe their budget needs to start coming down in those items that they're not doing anymore. So that has nothing to do with you, I know
Can't speak to that.
there are questions about it, so.
But how long has it been since that Kent Center School had the mowing in their budget? So it
Probably,
sounds like it's been
yeah.
a long time.
Long time.
Okay.
So they hired the second
And
person.
they don't, do they even have a baseball team?
They did last year.
Yeah, but now they go into a regional, they're not
No,
even
no,
a team
no,
for a
there is
regional.
not. It's not.
There is a region of push,
Right,
Right.
they are not going
Right.
to it, but my
Yeah,
So
point
as
is
of
that
last night, that was changed
to,
to the towns will take it on themselves, whomever wants to participate.
got it,
It is not regionalized.
okay.
It's not coming out of RSSC.
Good. So the point of the matter is, they may not even use it other than playground time. There you have it.
and the Park and Rec doesn't.
So the only thing I would like to,
Well, They
to,
will still have a baseball
Yeah,
team,
Right.
it just won't be regionalized, it'll
Right.
still be a
Right.
Kent team.
so under this ball field maintenance, I think we need to clarify who has the playground stuff before you even think about your master plan, because then you may have to work that into your master plan. Right?
Not at this time, like this one proposal for the 20,000 is for the ball fields, and that's what it says.
I'm not saying that.
But you're talking about the
I'm s-
bigger one.
If, what we have to do, I think,
Are you
is
talking
find
about the
out,
RFP for the park plan?
correct,
So that plan doesn't include that,
correct,
and doesn't have to include that, and
unless you own it,
we will never own it.
unless
It's
you're
our
responsible
Well,
for
right,
it.
oversight and
ownership
ownership are
of
way different
overseeing
things.
it. So what I'm saying is that if indeed it is determined,
I don't,
just go with me for a sec, if it is determined that it is on your plate, as you have said, then you need to make sure it's baked into the master plan so the town understands that this is another place that you have to deal with.
I still don't think under those auspices that it would go into our master plan for the parks.
Why not?
Because it's not so much a public park as it is a school place. And we can't, I mean, I don't think the school's just gonna let us go in there, you know, if our capital budget gives us $100,000, the school's not, I'm sure they wouldn't say no, but, you know, it's not our decision to go in there and change the playground.
Didn't you just say that you have ownership of it because of the lease? Did I hear that incorrectly?
You said
I
that.
said it's included in the lease. We
Which-
have oversight of the lease, but I personally don't believe that Park and Rec has responsibility for budget upkeep maintenance. The school has done that, and I think the school should continue to do that.
I don't disagree with you, but what I heard was, it was, because it was part of the lease, it was your responsibility. And did I hear that incorrectly?
I don't think we know if it's our responsibility, and
Then
I
let's
think
figure it
that's-
out. That's
Right,
so,
but I
so,
still don't think it'll be part of that RFP. I consider them differently as a town park as opposed to our school playground. And I don't consider the fields a town park. Those
I think
are our
the-
school
I
playing
think the
fields.
line ends at the basketball court, runs straight across. There's two separate leases.
So
which
if-
all I'm saying is, if indeed
So
it is
put
part of
more
it, and, I'm sorry?
in. So put some more in.
Well, you may have to, that's my point. I'm just saying that if you determine that unfortunately it is your responsibility to replace it,
I think at that point that we would come back to the Board of Selectmen or town meeting or whatever it would require at that point, because to make Park and Rec have responsibility over Kent Center School's playground is gonna be more than just us sitting here saying
So
Right, and
then,
I also
then let's
think,
get that in
what
an
is the-
agreement.
What is the,
But we need to decide this now, and we don't have time, that's gonna take a little while.
To find out who owns it.
No, to have meetings, once we find out who owns it, and, you know, regardless of who owns it, like we're saying, you know, Park and Rec should not have
But they-
have ownership over that Kent Center School playground.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but the center school didn't want to take care of the fields, right?
I know, because,
And that's why we got to that point.
so, I
I
don't
think
think
it
as
was a
long as we
combination
take
of factors,
Yeah.
and then I think it was just taken away from everybody
Yeah.
and put under the playing field committee.
Because it
Again,
wasn't getting done.
my opinion.
Yeah.
We lost our volunteer base,
Mhm.
some people didn't like how it was being mowed by the school.
Correct.
Okay,
That's more like,
so if
yeah.
the,
They didn't like the game more.
because it seems to me that in this, in the RFP, there's sort of a mission, right? There's
Mhm.
this strategic plan concept that you have for the green spaces that are under your purview, right?
Mhm.
So I sort of see there's a cadre of green spaces under Park and Rec's purview. I don't know if I see the ball fields as part of that. Right now, sitting here at 11 o'clock or 11:03 on Friday, I see the ball fields as a maintenance, an ongoing maintenance project that has been handed off to Park and Rec. And I see the green spaces that are under the purview of Park and Rec as another piece that this is going to be, it's focused on this.
Right.
So I think we need to, if Kent School wants to give us all that property, if they in fact own it all, and then it becomes part of your green spaces under your purview, then I think that changes the picture. But for right now, I see it as, that's a maintenance project, ongoing maintenance project, and this is because of the ownership, because the ownership is.
Yeah, but there are tons of places where you have a leasehold and you can do leasehold improvements. So for instance, a store down in the middle of town can upgrade and change and put additions on, but it's all, the owner is someone different. So I think this is the scenario where we have the opportunity to lease these fields, which we have been doing for a very long time, and we've improved them over time. We've replaced clay, we've replaced fencing. So I tend to disagree with you because it is considered part of park and recreation. You can go down there and fly a kite. I've seen people fly airplanes down there. I've seen people come out of the river in canoes. I've seen golfers
Right, but you
down
could
there.
go and do all of that stuff before it was under the Park and Rec's purview.
Well, Park and Rec always maintained everything from the Kent Center School fields down. The only addition here is the Kent Center School baseball field and part of their soccer
That's
field.
correct.
That's
But then
really the only
goalposts.
addition.
Park and Rec used to take care of what,
Even the mowing.
the softball
When
field,
the
no,
Kent Center School was doing
No,
the
Kent
mowing.
Center
The mowing
they
used to
did
be
the
done
whole
by
field.
Kent School.
no.
Yes, it
Kent
was.
Center.
They
No,
used to
Kent
send,
Center School motor.
Kent School would, believe me, I lived
No,
there.
Kent Center School used to have gang mowers originally behind
Before
the
Rick
scout
started
mower.
mowing, and
Way
then
bef-
before that, it was Kent School.
Kent School Rex and everybody would come down on the mowers, on the skags,
Right, but
and they
not
would mow
for-
the whole thing.
That's correct, but no, they didn't do that very long.
Oh, they did.
I'll look it up.
They did. So, but the point is that it's our responsibility.
It is our responsibility.
And again, the taxpayer pays for it one way or another. So I would prefer personally to have it under Park and Rec because it's just an extension of it. There's a proprietorship there that bothers me a little bit. That Kent Center School says you can't play on our ball field when it lays fallow and they don't even have a team. So I think that's something maybe we could discuss further. But that said, I don't have a problem with it. And I appreciate you guys taking that on.
I still think it should, the fields at this point, if it changes later, fine, but the field should be separate budget line than our RFP or parks.
Well, all I was talking about was equipment on the playing ground, and I just don't wanna get into a problem where Kent Center School says, no, it's not ours, it's yours because of the lease.
And that's something
And
that's.
And let's have that fight now,
Mhm.
and if we lose, let's put it in the RFP.
Well, I wouldn't consider it a fight.
Well, you know what I mean, it just, I mean, like, it's not a fight, you know what I mean,
A conversation, let's
well,
figure it out.
it's not even that, it is a determination as to who is going to get responsibility, and let's put it in writing and codify it. That's what I see.
So, let's go to, do you wanna do you wanna talk about the master plan, or do you want, let's just talk about the master plan in terms of what you're requesting for this budget.
So, I should, you all have this.
South corner. You all have, do you have this,
Yes, I got it, I looked at it last night.
Pretty much what it says here, we have money that was given to us years ago that's been sitting in an account that we could use. We're hoping to have some money left out of our budget to transfer and use. The committee is gonna be looking to the town for some donations to fill whatever we need.
the townspeople,
Townspeople, community organizations, somebody, you know,
like a Lions or like an individual?
Could be both.
Yeah, whomever they can get. And so we are requesting an additional 6,000 in our budget to fulfill those needs, to get this up and running off the ground.
And so the 6,500 that you're gonna be pulling out of the operating budget, the 1920 operating budget, what was that originally budgeted for?
Lifeguard salaries that were not used last summer.
Okay,
You'll see there's still quite a bit of money left in that budget
And
line.
hourly employees? And though, did you just have trouble getting lifeguards? Is that, do you feel like that's becoming like a chronic issue? And
Statewide.
why,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just us,
It's statewide.
but,
is it because of pay? Is it because it's just a niche-y, job that kids don't do anymore?
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah,
Okay.
less,
Pretty much.
less, I mean, traditionally, not always, though, traditionally, there's a core group that are local kids,
Right.
don't have that core group anymore. Yeah, it's a combination of factors, so.
And do you look to hire, when you're hiring for that, do you look to hire them and they have to come with the lifeguard certification? Or have you had any thought to, hey,
Help
it's,
offset that, we have not had that conversation.
well,
but-
no, just to say, instead of hoping that you get certified lifeguards, going out and reaching out to, you know, it's a certain age, right? It's in a certain age range,
Yep.
and soliciting that age range, and saying, we're gonna host, we're gonna, you know, help.
Yep, so there's a class every year in Lakeville, so we make that known. And we solicit at the high school as one place. And then solicit to the people that are taking that class, hey, we have a job for you. If you don't already have a job when you get done with the course.
And how many people do they certify on
I think
average?
quite a few people.
Oh, it's a lot?
Yeah, it's a pretty big group. It pulls, you know, from the whole 6 towns and plus whatever. I don't know off the top of my head, I could find out, but they have a pretty big class.
And do you think the Kent School would ever host?
They used to have, but they're in, like even if they did, I don't know if we would get enough. I know it's something we could explore. But there is a class that's quote unquote, well, regionally, that people can take.
And so if you don't have lifeguards,
Can't.
you have to close, right?
Exactly.
How many days were you closed last year of the season?
Weekends.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you were,
We open Monday through Friday, we are closed weekends.
And how many lifeguards? Do you have 2 on?
But we had last year.
But in the past, we've had more.
Yeah.
Right, I remember
4.
the days.
Yeah.
Yeah. 5, 6, 5, yeah.
And, going back up, the plan encompasses 3 phases, the inventory, so what is, can you talk about the, like, what that is? When you say inventory?
So it's going to the parks and looking at what is existing, what programs happen there, what infrastructure is there, what the sites look like, what kind of natural resources are there. And that would be for Kent Common and for Emery Park.
So everything as far as this master plan is those two
parks.
spaces?
Yep.
And how long, what's the time frame for this?
For me, it is all mapped out in the plan.
Yeah, I didn't bring it with me either.
But in the plan, is it in the,
So, schedule. Phase 1 would be 3 weeks,
8, 10, 11.
5 weeks. Yeah, it looks like the whole thing would be 11 weeks.
yeah, so 3-4 months.
And so what would that, where's that total, 23,800, what does that get you? So you are gonna spend $23,800, and in 11 weeks later, you would get from this designer, right? What do you get?
So we would get a plan. In all fairness, Lynn is not voted against, so, you know, but everybody else was in favor. Anyway, so.
That's
we will
okay,
get-
like,
Yeah.
that,
Absolutely, so that's why she's kind of deferring to me, so normally I defer to her. So we would get a plan of, this is a plan for Emery Park. So at Emery Park, we propose, this is our plan for the future for Emery Park. And this is our plan for the future for Kent Common, and this is what we see happening. So then Park and Rec would have a tool whereby to plan what they're going to do down the road with their 2 parks. And then Park and Rec would have to go and take that plan and then figure out how to make those things happen and prioritize, and then come back presumably and put things in a 5-year capital plan, and vet it out. What happened was, Jean, just for background, the park playgrounds at both parks are 20 and 21 years old and need to be replaced. So we put money in 5-year capital, but I said to them, before that money comes to fruition, what kind of playground are we putting in? What's our vision? What are we thinking? We don't really have one. We really don't ever plan very well, just collectively. So it was like, let's take a step back and see. Park and Rec created this Parks Master Plan Subcommittee, kind of a cross-section of people. They met several times, came up with an RFP, and then it was like, how are we gonna fund it? We came to the selectmen and they said, give us a price, we're not giving you any money till we have a price. In the meantime, Miranda from Studio Park Ave moved to Kent. She is a young parent and has this business, and she's interested in working with us because she lives here. So the subcommittee met with her and came up, she came up with this proposal, which the subcommittee endorsed and then brought to the commission.
Oh, so this wasn't the result of an RFP and proposals?
No, because our RFP would be quite a bit more money.
Just to write an RFP?
If we went out and put this out to bid, our understanding is it would be way more money than this. So.
And who told you?
Well, Abigail.
Because how would you know if you
but
it's like,
Abigail Smith-Hamby, who's on our Park and Rec Commission, is in this business and she knows. So.
Do we have any policy component of expenditures and what they have to go out on an RFP or not? Because I think we do.
to revisit it. But yeah, I think there was a,
There's a threshold
yeah.
that requires us to
Mhm.
do that.
I mean, we could put it out,
I think it's $10,000.
do we still have that as a policy?
So, a couple of things I'm interested in. One, the four that were interested in, or approved this, the argument is that we need a plan. We need a comprehensive
A
plan,
comprehensive plan, it's more than the commission can do by itself.
okay? And the parameters in which we're designing this is, are we designing this? I know part of that's gonna come out of the plan, I would think. But from Park and Rec's perspective, is who is the constituent and what are the numbers that we're looking at to provide this kind of plan? Because in looking through the material that they had sent, it seemed like they had these big centralized areas, whether it was an elementary school in a city or 133 acre preserve that sound, and again, I didn't look up Google where they were, but it looked like they were pretty intensive areas that were used. And my line of questioning is, and thinking is like, okay, well, how many people do we plan to go to these spots and how many can we actually attract? And does Park and Rec have at least an idea as to what we can do there?
So I think part of the plan is to look at how are the parks used right now?
Yeah.
What could they be used for? What other programming could we bring in? What does the community wanna see? There'll be a community engagement piece, where we will have the community come in and give feedback and, you know, what would they like to see? Kind of what is the focus for each of the parks? I know last year we had a summer concert scheduled there, unfortunately it got rained out. At KenCom.
KenCom,
Under
okay.
the pavilion. So things like that are part of this plan, and looking to the future, how do you attract when tourists are in town to get them, how to make the parks more visible, so people know where they are.
Okay.
Those components are all part of what we're working on.
And then one was against it, and why?
I'll talk.
Yeah,
I am not against the idea. I have a hard time just spending that much money when I don't know that we've exhausted all of our ideas. I've said this before, it's very hard for Park and Rec to get money. And if we put something in the capital plan and something needs to be cut, Park and Rec is usually the first thing to be cut. So when we have money, I just wanna use it the best way possible. And maybe when it's done, I'll be convinced that it was worth the money. And this is a good deal for what we are getting, don't get me wrong, I know this stuff is very expensive, I've talked to a couple of friends who are in this business and they said it's a good price, but it's still close to $25,000 that, I don't know, could that be spent more on, you know, on playground equipment or kiosks at Emery Park, we're building it up, but at some point, we still may need to do this. So it was a good presentation. Like I said, I'm not against the idea of somebody helping us along. I just have a hard time with the $25,000, $23,000.
yeah, I get that.
10,000 of it is the ward fund. Granted, it's been sitting there for years and we haven't used it and stuff. So where else should it go? I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I've just stuck to my guns since this came out.
Well, as you know, I've never been a proponent of it either, but I do understand that from a volunteer base of people who really don't know how to create a park, 'cause I certainly wouldn't. Sometimes
That's
you
where
do
it's
need
at.
help to,
Right.
my bigger concern, it's not even a concern, my question is, who are we serving first? And I would not like to go down a road where we have this master plan that we have to put in all this infrastructure or even major changes and then nobody uses it. That's my sort of trepidation on it.
Yeah,
And
I'm a very, I like data, and I think in order to understand where to go with this, we need to know who's using the parks and how are they using the parks.
I think that's a big part of this,
Mhm.
because it's
I don't
hard.
see- I read through it last night.
Well, not a big part of it, but it can, part of what I'm saying is that they can help us decide what maybe can pull people in more, what they've seen in other jobs that attracts the people once the program is done. How do we enhance the pavilion? Do we just go in and put new playground equipment in? Is it that simple, or is there a lot more to it? I don't know, what does attract people? I'm hoping they can help us figure that out. And, we've had some good ideas to put kiosks in at Emery Park, and with the little scanners, so you can hear the bird noise or the animal noises. I think that's a great idea. That wasn't from her, but, what else can we find out that isn't gonna cost a lot of money? What else can she tell us that, from big to little? So just because she comes back and says, well, you should close in Emery Park and put in a real pool, doesn't mean we're gonna do that. These are their ideas, and we take from that what we can do. So hopefully there's some small things we can do that'll start to increase visitation and increase people's good feelings about our town parks. There's gonna be some big things too.
But there's where I have the problem.
We don't
If
know.
you are trying to drive more people to Emery Park, the question is, why? It's almost like the children's center, what is it, why is it our responsibility to drive people where they may not want to? I see it certainly as a means of having something for people to recreate in and be safe but the scale is what I have it's challenging. I know that when they put in the trails for Emery Park, all the way up to the top, and Karen Chase had this whole program, and there was, they had done the trails, and nobody used it. Nobody used them. And so they went fallow, and so all that time and energy, which was well thought out, well executed, didn't have an end result group. I mean, a few people hike it, but not.
And we keep it maintained.
And you keep it maintained. So I guess what I'm struggling with and looking for is Park and Rec to decide who they want to be and not have somebody tell them, well, this is what you could be or should be. And then once Park and Rec says, we are going to be this, then we say, okay, let's take a look at Kent Commons. How do we maximize it within that construct?
So do you wanna come and help us with those ideas?
Sure.
I've already
I can
looked
help
at
you.
it, we looked at them many years ago.
I mean, I think, honestly though, it's gonna be one person's idea. I think maybe we're fighting too much. Maybe you do a deep down on Emery Park. How many people attend it? How many people do you expect to attend it over time? What condition does it have to be, and how do you maintain that? How many people use Kent Commons? What do you do? I mean, you did the tennis courts. That was brilliant because, and a long time coming, but people use it. Very small group, but people use it.
That goes back to capital budget.
It does, but
But the other piece is, so we say a lot of people use it. How do we quantify a lot of people?
it's the same 41% that keep going back and back and back to the library. There's a group of people that
Right,
use.
but they count every person who comes into the library. We
And-
don't, do we,
No.
right, and I know we don't, but, well,
Well, you can. Park
Right, we
passes is
can.
the number one.
right, park
Yeah.
passes and, there are small things that you could do to help yourselves, be collecting that data. But I think it's really important to actually know who's coming and using the different green
The
spaces
worst part
and
is
the
that
different
changes too.
parks and recs.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
That's why I'm
Kent
telling-
saved Emery Park, basically. They were getting ready to shut down Emery Park
Mhm.
at some point.
So there's 24, 25 kids a week.
Right. Otherwise, that wouldn't, if you didn't have those kids at Emery Park every day, it's not like you have 60 kids like we used to when I was a kid that went, they're on their own every day to Emery Park. Really, the camp saved Emery Park. because we had looked into putting a pool. Matt Hannon had given quotes to put a pool inside Emery Park, and then we looked at new pools at the Common Park, because there was no official sidewalk to Emery Park for the kids to walk from the center of town to Emery
Sidewalk
Park.
at all, according to every park.
And this has been going on for years and years and years with Emery Park. I mean, what,
Forever.
if we did a pool at the Common Park, the senior center could then use, and the people in town could walk to the Common Park and use, because an elderly person is not gonna really be able to walk down those stairs, even though you can take that road down to the below, but still it's hard for them to walk from the lower park up to Emery Park and then get into the pool.
And interestingly, Ed, the other demographic that most uses Emery Park are the seniors.
That's right, and they were the ones that came in and fought to keep it exactly the way it was and not put a
Right.
finished pool inside that pool.
Right. Yep. They
So
said-
it
And
may
we went through it.
It may reveal like a, I don't know, a different picture or a more robust picture of where you want, like it may, you're digging into the data and, you know, it's probably gonna be going through registrations and stuff like that, may actually point you in a slightly different direction, and also taking into consideration what's happening with our population in town.
But that's
That
what
doesn't really speak to this, you know,
your camp
larger
average
conversation.
29 kids usually,
24 is the maximum
20,
that we take.
24.
Yeah, and
We could increase that, but then you need more counselors.
Oh,
and
no, I
more
understand, I'm just
space.
asking, that's a pretty good number.
Yeah, yeah.
well, and if, to that point, if that is your goal, which may be, not yours, but the collective of the Park and Rec, then let's get there, if that's what the goal is. It seems strange or different to me that you're gonna ask a person outside of this area to say, yeah, that's something you should focus on. When I think intuitively, if you feel as a collective that that's what you focus on, let's do it. But you have to get consensus, obviously, from your committee. The other question that I would put on the table is, okay, we create recreation for our townspeople, right? But there's a limited amount of townspeople here, always have been, always will, and segments of our town people.
Right.
Okay. Is there a thought that it might be beneficial to Park and Rec to appeal to outside people? People come to town, a dog park. People come to town, a place to get into the river. People come to town and do these recreational things that you can go when you can go to certain towns and do public recreation. And if so, does that have merit, and would it tie into, I'm making it up, the Chamber of Commerce having, you know, people come because they can put their dog somewhere and then shop? Those are the questions that I don't, well, somebody, an outside consultant could say, well, this is what's happened here and this is what's happened here, you can grab onto them. But I think if the committee itself just sort of maybe takes a perspective as to who do we want as our constituents and how do we do that?
So I think they already voted on that with this. That's what they want.
Well, what they want is somebody to tell them that. And my thinking is that I don't know, you can go online and find out what other towns are doing. So you don't really need somebody to tell you what other towns are doing as ideas. So that's where I have a challenge with it, because I don't think Park and Rec has an actual mission that they've got. And now they're looking to spend money to have somebody tell them their mission. That's my problem with it.
Okay.
And spending $23,000 to have somebody say, well, this should be the mission. Here's the problem I had with the elementary school, that hired an architect that's used to doing elementary schools down in Greenwich, and so now he lights up my town with unnecessary lighting. But he did it, or she did it, I don't know who the architect was, because that's what they normally did. But that did not fit in Kent, in my opinion.
I don't disagree.
So that's where I'm not in favor of this, because I don't think, as I said before, as you know, that I don't think Park and Rec has actually figured out what they want to be.
Right, so I sort of agree with Chris, and I wonder if it may not be more of an activity or a process for the Park and Rec to go through that. Like, let's get back to basics and let's look at our past, just from our Park and Rec commission and our director, your longevity with your director, and talk about what has been our mission, and do we want to, is this our mission for our future? And based on a lot of things, so the POCD, the Plan of Conservation and Development, I think is gonna be an important part of the next, I think it's a year and a half. Year and a half. And that may help guide Park and Rec into what their mission should be. But I think like that sort of getting back to basic SWOT analysis might be a better starting place. Like, I almost think like this is the cart before the horse. That's just.
So might it be appropriate to consider taking some of the $10,000 that you have in the ward and hiring a consultant to come into a workshop with you and say, what are you guys? Who are you guys? And you all have to look at each other. I don't know. And you can invite, maybe the first go round is internal. Second go round is public. The third go round is deep dive. Okay, committee, who are we? What do we want to do? Because I think I'm not adverse to spending money. I am not. I just don't feel confident that the result will be our organic desire with smart planning. It'll just be somebody else's put on top of Connecticut, and then we'll end up with things that really don't work.
I guess to that I say we're really only here to ask the board extra for that $6,000 request to be added into our budget. And the details of all which we just talked about, which I don't disagree with, are not, that's more like come to our meeting and explain. But as for the request, you're stating your reason why you may or may not go with it, but it's,
You're right.
they've already approved this, and they're just looking for the funding. If you guys, if the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance or whomever decides that this does not go into our budget, they're gonna find another way to come up with that $6,000, maybe. I don't know what the next step would be.
It's
Right.
gotta go out to bid, because it's beyond the $10,000
So
threshold, so we
Yes.
go back to the commission and say,
Okay, so
here's the feedback, correct?
And
Yes.
Joyce, because this is a special meeting, and it was about the 2021 budget.
It just says,
This is,
Are we outside of the?
Budget, though.
no, this is asked for in the 2021 budget.
It's in the, as for in the budget.
but her question, I think, pertains to the money that's in this year's budget that you have on the document.
Right.
But that's part of their
It's
plan.
under the budget.
It's fair.
Okay.
Then
I don't wanna get
your point is
out
Yeah.
of
your
the
point
back.
is spot on. There are two components. One, we don't have workshops with you. So the only way that Jean engages, but we as a board engage with people is through money. And when you want money, we need to know why, and you've done a great job of presenting. You haven't convinced me, not you. The board has not convinced me that this is well-spent money. Therefore, you would not get my vote. Recommendations are such that I'm willing to spend money, but I think you need to take different steps. Take that as, no, Chris Garrity's wrong, I'm not doing that, fine, I don't care, that's not the point. The point is that I need to be convinced that there is a different step and plan going on than just we're hiring somebody for $23,000. And so the commission could go back and say, we are going to find that $6,000 somewhere and do it, but then, again, I'm gonna have the same problem.
But then we won't be asking you for the money though. And also, like Leslie said, we have to go back and put this out to bid anyway, so we're kinda, I don't know if it's gonna make it in this budget plan.
You
Or-
mean the
or we-
6,500?
Pardon me?
You mean the 6,500 that you want?
The 6,000 that we're asking for the extra request, the one-time request of up to 6,000.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we were talking about something.
we back it up and don't
Mhm.
spend as much like you said. I don't know. It definitely at this point needs to go back and we have to go by the bid policy if there is such.
I'm not,
Can I just ask one quick question?
Yeah.
What is the timeline for this? Because you have 2 budget years included in your request, so I'm on, I mean,
You're probably
in
gonna,
my opinion,
you probably
but
wanna
when
start
is
it
it?
before the end of this facility
It
year,
would,
right?
could straddle the 2 budget years.
Yeah.
We could straddle.
And the people who are doing the RFP would be okay with that?
I don't think it's all paid at once.
Okay.
Yeah, it's-
So
It's not a
it's
$2,300
it's
upfront.
free upfront.
Yeah, it's 3
no,
phases.
3 phases.
Oh, it's 3.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
3 phases.
So I think the most important thing is that we have to go back and look at the policy. And we covered a lot, but just to go back to the primary, the 2020,
mhm.
do y'all have any
No more
other
questions.
questions? And
Thank you.
appreciate the copies and the extra narrative. Is that the lease? Oh.
Be another
Look
document.
at that, that's vintage.
I'll leave that with you and I'll go and look to see if I find
Is
anything
that the
else.
lease?
Yeah.
We
But
had at school?
you should have that in your
Yeah, we probably
file
have
as
it.
well.
Yeah, that is file.
Do you, why don't you keep this? Do
Okay.
we have a copy
Okay.
in the files?
I think so, but I'll take a copy of
Okay.
that for sure.
I don't wanna have, I
That's
wanna be the
Is-
keeper
when-
of one, you know.
Was that the, when was that
When's
lease
that?
agreement? That was
Well, it
20
was,
years ago?
it was updated in 2005.
Yeah. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Scares the heck out of me. Which time that?
Those are okay.
Because the old lease, we found out the hard way before we renewed the 50-year, didn't include any structures or buildings on the ball fields. So technically, all the backstops and the dugout was illegal, not supposed to be there. So luckily, Kent School was willing to renew the lease and re-sign it with those structures. Remember that, Leslie, when
Yes,
we went
and you
through that?
can't put up any buildings without their permission.
Or even the soccer goals weren't, if they were in the ground, weren't.
Right, yeah, everything is temporary, so.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thanks.
We'll adjourn at 11:39. Are we good to adjourn? Yes. That was quick. That was scheduled. Thanks.
So we're done?
Go for today. For this one.
Oh, yeah. We weren't gonna set
Thank you.
dates?
Thank you. We have a date for one more